Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight we journey into the heart of Appalachia, where the mountains keep their secrets and the woods whisper after dark. These are true accounts. Shadows that move without bodies, voices that call names they should never know, and footsteps that follow when no one is there. 5 disturbing true horror stories from Appalachia. This is a brand new channel and I'm aiming for 1,000 subscribers this month. If true horror is your thing, hit subscribe. It tells YouTube to send these stories your way, and it helps this channel survive. Kill the lights, mute the world. Let's begin. I'm not from the mountains. I'm a flatland kid who thinks hills when he sees anything taller than a Walmart. My girlfriend May is the opposite. Her family's from a long ridgeline outside Summersville, West Virginia, where the roads fold back on themselves and cell service cuts out like you're stepping off the edge of the map. Last spring, after my contract got cut and May's grandma passed, we moved into the old place to save money and clear it out. It's quiet, May said, like church quiet. She meant it as a good thing. The house sits halfway down a holler, with a creek that sounds like someone wringing a wet rag forever. There's a patch of yard, 2 rusted swings, and at the bottom corner, tucked behind a line of hemlock, an old stone well. You could miss it if you weren't looking. It has a waist-high wall made of stacked fieldstone and a round wooden cap like a breadboard that someone cut to fit. There's a pulley and a length of frayed rope. The pulley doesn't squeak. I only noticed how weird that was after everything else. Our first full day, we met our nearest neighbor, a woman named Evelyn Klein, who had the knotty hands of someone who's lifted firewood her whole life. She brought us a pie that tasted like it, had been poured straight out of the ground, blackberries and something brighter like mint. "Your grandma was a good woman," she said to May. "Hard. Good." She looked over May's shoulder toward the hemlocks. Then she said very calmly, "Don't lean over that well. People do foolish things when they're listening." I laughed, because I thought she meant alcohol. May didn't laugh. She asked Evelyn if she remembered the old story about a cow falling in. Evelyn held my eyes instead of May's. "You hear it? You walk away," she said. "Promise me." We were still, moving boxes when the first humming started. It was around 9:30. I was in the kitchen trying to get the pilot light to behave, and May was outside clearing off the porch. I heard her call me, "Hey babe, come here." And I wiped my hands and went out. She stood by the edge of the yard with her head tilted, like she was trying to catch a word at the end of a sentence. "Do you hear that?" I thought it was a peeper frog at first, or somebody's TV with the volume down. It came in a thin ribbon, barely there, like something brushing the inside of my ear. Not music exactly, not words yet. Just a tune you half remember, and the more you try to grab it, the more it slides away. "It's the creek," I said. "The creek doesn't hum," she said, and the way she said it made me swallow the next joke. The sound came in pulses. 2 notes held and 1 dropped again and again. Then a break, then the same 2 notes. The air had that damp, early summer feel, like there's a sponge over everything. I went down the yard with her and stood by the hemlocks. The humming steadied. And this will sound stupid, but after maybe 30 seconds, my chest went loose and warm, like somebody had put a hand flat on it and pushed back a little. Not hard, like a mother's hand in a movie. That sounds corny. I don't have a better way to say it. May said, "It's the well." We stood there while the line of sound kept laying itself down. The wooden cap had a ring bolt in the center. You could see where rainwater had darkened a circle around it 100,000 times. I reached out and touched the cap, and the humming seemed to get closer, not louder, just closer, like the difference between a radio in the next room and a radio behind your head. "This is stupid," I said, and my voice shook a little. "It's probably a pipe." "We don't have a pump," May said. "It's capped." The humming broke. For 1 second, there was nothing but the creek and a dog far off down the ridge. Then I heard a piece of melody I knew as well as anything from childhood. It's the one my mother used to sing when she wanted me to fall asleep in the back seat of the car, a little falling down tune with no words she made up. I hadn't heard it in 20 years. It came up out of that well like breath, and layered under it, I swear to you, was a different voice. Not a harmony, more like a second throat learning the sound. I reached for May's hand. She wasn't looking at me. She had tears on her face. "That's my mom," she said. Listen. May's mom is alive. They talk every Thursday." What I heard coming out of the well wasn't a recording. It wasn't an echo because we hadn't said anything. It had the tiny mistakes real people have when they sing the same old thing, dragging the last note, breathing too early. If we hadn't been standing there staring at a half-rotten wooden cap, I would have thought someone was behind us trolling us with a speaker. The hemlocks cowboyed over and sighed, and there was that hand on my chest again, heavier. "I'm going to open it," I said. "Don't," May said. "Please don't." That first night we didn't. We went back inside and pretended to watch TV. May sat on the edge of the couch, shoulders tense, eyes on the window even when she wasn't looking. I got mad because I was scared, and fear runs through me as a kind of sarcasm. "We live in a valley," I said. Sound bounces. Maybe there's a church down the road. Maybe somebody left a radio in a barn. People do weird stuff. May said, "People don't make your mom's tune." Maybe I'm hearing what I want to hear. A car went by on the road above, lights rolling along the ceiling, and we both flinched like kids caught up past bedtime. When I took the trash, out I stood at the edge of the porch and listened. The humming had stopped. Nothing but the creak. I told myself we'd been tired. I told myself the brain likes patterns and will make them wherever it can. I slept like I was underwater. At 2 a.m, I woke with my heart kicking like it knew something I didn't. The room smelled like damp stone. In the pause between breaths I heard through the closed window, a thread of sound like a tea kettle set 3 rooms away. May was already awake. I could tell by the way she held herself still, as if the blankets would make noise. "We need to bring it up," I said. Not because I believed that, but because saying anything felt better than not saying it. May got out of bed without turning on the lamp. We went outside barefoot. The grass was cold. The moon was a late sliver, low and mean. The hemlocks formed a little tunnel if you stood in exactly the right place. We went to the well. The humming was there, soft and steady, and over it a lullaby I don't know if I can describe without sounding like I'm forcing it. The melody was simple, like something you'd sing because language got too heavy. May whispered, "Mom?" And in a voice that matched hers, that had the husk in it that May gets when she's first out of bed, the well whispered back, "I'm here." Every hair on my body stood up so fast it hurt. I said, "That's not funny." And the well said, with my mother's tone when she caught me about to cry, "Baby, shh, shh." May's hand crushed mine so hard my knuckles cracked. "Don't lean," she said, "don't lean, don't lean." The urge to put my face over that dark circle was like thirst. Not curiosity, need. It was insane. It was like my mouth knew cold water before I did. My shoulders leaned without asking me. I gripped the edge of the stones because I wanted to, see how deep it went, or if there was a trick, or if someone had cut a speaker into the cap and was getting their jollies right then. "Back," May said, and she yanked me, and my knees hit the stones and skinned. "Back." We left the yard without running because it felt important not to run. I locked the door. We sat on the floor until the sky turned the color of dirty dishwater. In the morning, we went to Evelyn's. She listened to May tell it without interrupting. She didn't look surprised. She didn't do any of the things outsiders assume mountain people do in stories. She poured coffee and sat with her hands around her mug and nodded. When May finished, Evelyn said, "You didn't open it." "No," I said. "Good," Evelyn said. She looked at me. "People always want to look. They think it's like a cave in the park. It isn't." "What is it?" I asked stupidly. She shrugged. Well, it pulls. You don't know you're leaning until somebody grabs your belt. There was a time when we kept a board nailed across it, and a log chain on top of that. People come out from town thinking they're going to be brave. They think the story's theirs already. They get quiet walking back to their trucks. She sipped and winced like the coffee was too hot. "Your grandma kept that cap on. She knew. Don't take it off." What did she know? May asked. There's voices down there, Evelyn said, as if she was telling us the creek floods in spring. Sometimes they're the ones you want. Sometimes they're ones you never met yet. That last part slid past me at the time. We should have left. I know that's what you're thinking. Pack your stuff. Break your lease. Even if your landlord is the ghost of your girlfriend's grandma. The truth is more boring. We had nowhere else. Our savings were thin. My next job didn't start for 2 months. May wanted to sort her grandma's clothes and pictures and letters. I told myself we could ignore a piece of stone out behind some trees. We couldn't. Around dusk that night, we heard the humming again, at the same pitch like a tuning fork hidden in the grass. May put her phone on the cap and hit record. We stood there holding each other's elbows like we were pushing each other away, and the humming changed. It didn't get louder, it got complicated. I heard a man's voice that might have been the radio but wasn't. I heard a baby's breath like a whistle. I heard the exact tone of May's mom saying May's full name the way she did when May left her shoes on the stairs. Then, terribly, I heard my own voice from earlier that afternoon when I'd been on a call with my buddy Nate. I heard myself say, bright and fake, "No, it's good, man, it's fine. We're good." The well gave my smile back to me through sound. That night, May listened to the recording in bed with the volume down low. She stopped it, rewound, played it again. "It's our voices," she said. "But it isn't. Do you hear how the words don't fit the breaths?" She showed me the waveform. I don't know what I was supposed to be looking at other than a machine-made scribble. But I heard it. Close your eyes and think of how a person sounds when they're reading a script they wrote. Then think of how they sound when they're actually alive. The recording had the first thing. What came out of the well had the second. It was subtle. It kept me up anyway. The next day, I went to the hardware store for a new hose and a heavier padlock for the shed. The guy behind the counter rang me up and said, "You're George's girl's fella, ain't you? Down in the Klein Holler?" I said yes. He looked at the lock. "You got raccoons?" "Voices," I said. I don't know why. He didn't laugh. He looked past me at the opposite wall like there was a calendar there with bad news. "Don't open it," he said. When I left, I noticed a poster nailed to the bulletin board by the door. It listed emergency numbers in neat columns. Sheriff, fire, rescue, poison control. At the bottom, someone had handwritten a number in blue pen and the words, "Call Old Man Holcomb if the well sings." Back home, I told May about it. She didn't want to call. "People have their ways," she said. "We don't need to be the city idiots." "We're not city," I said. "We're broke." I waited until May was in the shower and called anyway. A voice answered on the third ring. "Holcomb." I told him our names, where we were, what we'd heard. He didn't ask questions. "Don't drop anything down," he said. "Not even a stick, not a penny. You hear me?" "I hear you," I said, which was a stupid choice of words. And he said, "Tonight at 10, you get in your truck. You drive, somewhere you can't hear it. You stay until sunrise. We can't leave our house every night until sunrise. You can if you want to stay alive long enough to get sick of it," he said. I thanked him and told myself I wasn't going to do what he said. At 9:30, after May went to bed with earplugs in, I put my shoes on and went outside with a flashlight and a hand towel like I was going to fix something. The yard felt different, like it had been arranged a degree off. I could see the dark where the hemlocks were. The creek sounded like it had a cold. A little wind ran along the grass and then stopped. The humming bled through from the far side of the yard like it had traveled a long way. I clicked the flashlight off because the light made me feel seen, and the second I did, I felt foolish and then scared for feeling foolish. I walked down to the well. The cap was damp. The ring bolt was cold. The rope hung slack through the pulley, into nothing. Someone, some version of me I didn't know about, had wiped the cap clean. I put the towel over the cap and pressed down on it like I was going to deadlift the whole circle and throw it in the grass just to prove I could. The humming opened into my mother's tune, and in the next breath, the well sang in May's voice. "Babe?" My hand froze on the cap. "Yeah," I said, and the well said it too. almost at the same time, the way you do when your friend is talking to someone on the other side of a phone call. Then, with a half-beat lead like it could predict, the second my mouth would move, it said, "Don't, please don't." I stepped back. That half-beat scared me in a way I can't explain. It felt like the gap between what your body does and what your mind says about it. The well was in that gap. I went inside. I lay on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling, and waited for the first birds to start up. We tried to live around it. We turned on fans at night. We put a white noise app on May's phone. We slept with the window open or closed. None of it mattered. Every night, at some point between 9 and 2, the sound would come. Sometimes it was just the 2-note hum, like a refrigerator turning on and off. Sometimes it was voices. Sometimes it was a chorus of breath. If we stayed in the bedroom, if we didn't go to the window or the porch, it stayed soft. If we moved, toward the back of the house, it grew teeth. 2 things happened the same week that made it impossible to treat as a weird bit of local color. The first was the voicemail. My phone lit up around 11 with a missed call from good old Mom. She hates voicemail and refuses to learn how to listen to them, so I always answer. I picked up and heard nothing, then a faint hiss, then the low recording quality warble and my mother's voice, not live, not calling, humming that lullaby. She hasn't sung it to me since I was 6. The voicemail ran 1 minute and 40 seconds, timed out by the app. At the end, after a long breath, my mother's voice said, with this exact phrase I've never heard her say in my life, "Lean, baby." The second was the deputy. He came by one afternoon in a cruiser with the windows down and that slow, low-manner lawmen put on when they want to seem like they're just friendly neighbors. He asked if we were the folks staying at the Bennett place. He said somebody had reported hearing a woman calling for help down our way the night before. He wanted to be sure we were all right. "We're fine," I said. He looked at the hemlocks. "You know to keep that lid on?" he said. "We do," I said. He nodded. "Good." He put the car in gear and didn't go. "Ma'am," he said to May, "if you get calls that don't make sense in the night, you unplug your phones, don't pick up." "My mother lives in Ohio," May said. "Don't pick up," he said again. He touched the brim of his hat like we were in a movie and rolled away. I watched red dust make loops in the cruiser's wake. May called her mom that night. They talked about casseroles. They talked about weather. May didn't bring up the well. Her mom asked if we were going to church anywhere, and May said we might. After she hung up, she sat with her hands in her lap and said, "What if it isn't the well? What if it's the holler? What if there's a reason people built a well exactly there and not somewhere else?" "I don't care what it is," I said. "We need to go somewhere else." "We're here till August," May said. "We can't. Just bail on my family's house." "It's a house," I said. "It's my grandma," she said. She wasn't right and she wasn't wrong. I did something I'm not proud of the next day. Evelyn was in her garden cutting back the tough weeds from around her beans, and I asked her for Old Man Holcomb's address. She gave it to me without comment. I drove 20 minutes along a road that ran the same creek 24 times and found myself at the end of a lane where a little square house sat with all its windows open and every shade pulled down. A man the size of a coat rack came out on the porch. His hair was the ash white you only get after 80. His eyes were not old. He tapped the rail with one finger. "You're the boy," he said. "I'm 32, I said. "You're the boy," he said again. "You didn't drive away when I told you." "I did," I said. "One night." I told him about the voicemail. He nodded like a man agreeing with Rain. "It gets smarter," he said. "That's all. It learns the shape of what makes you come." He looked at me to see if I was going to say that made no sense. I didn't. "You got rope?" "Yes," I said. "You think rope will help?" he said. "It won't. Rope helps the person doing the pulling. If there's no one to pull you, you go in quiet as stepping off your porch." He pointed at my feet. "You scuff your toes when you get near it just so you can hear yourself. Don't take your hands off your belt. Put your belt on one loop tighter." "What is it?" I asked. "Oh well," he said again. like he was tired of the question. It holds water sometimes, and sometimes it holds something else. That's enough. I don't know why, but that calm answer took me apart more than any ghost story would have. I thanked him and left with my face hot like I'd been scolded. On Dorian, the way home I thought about how the humming made me feel. Not scared first. Warm. I thought about the way my mother's voice softened, how it turned me 6 again without my consent. I thought about the words "lean, baby," and about the half-beat lead the well had on my mouth. That night I told May we needed to test something. We sat at the kitchen table with the back door shut. I set my phone's timer to go off in 5 minutes. I'm going to say something weird, I said. Don't laugh, just listen to what comes out of the well after. What are you going to say? She asked. You'll hear, I said. I waited until the timer showed 10 seconds, and then I said, in an even, careful voice, tomorrow at noon I will go to the well and pour my coffee in. The timer beeped. We sat there not breathing. 2 minutes later, out through the door, through the wood, through the thin insides of the house, the well said in my voice, tomorrow at noon I will go to the well and pour my coffee in. May put her hand over her mouth like she was going to be sick. Don't you do it, she said. I won't, I said. At noon the next day, against every idiot instinct in my body, I made coffee and walked down to the well. I told myself this was how you break a spell. You don't do what it tells you. I held the mug over the cap. The steam fogged the wood. The hemlocks had their deep shade going full blast, that green black that makes your eyes lie. I tipped the mug. Nothing came. Out the coffee had gone cold sometime between the door and the well. I don't mean cooling down. I mean cold like it had been in the refrigerator. It was like the air between my hand and the cap had a layer in it that took heat and kept it for itself. I stood there holding the mug like an idiot, and then turned the whole thing over to prove I had agency. Coffee fell on the cap and sheeted off, and the well made a small sound like a throat. That afternoon we packed a bag. We planned to stay with May's cousin in Richwood for a few days and get a grip. May taped a note to the fridge for herself. Don't go down there, don't pick up the phone. She laughed when she wrote it. I can't believe I'm writing this, she said. We didn't leave that day. The truck wouldn't start. The lights came on. The engine turned once and then hung there like it was listening. I am not a conspiracy person. I believe in spark plugs. It might have been the starter. It might have been a dirty line. It might have been the well. And the only reason I even let that thought in my head is because we were sitting in the truck, waiting for the tow, and I heard, not from the yard but from the air vent, a sound like a kettle beginning to sing. May reached across the seat and turned the dial to off. The sound kept going. We got a ride into town. The mechanic took the keys and told us to come back tomorrow. We slept that night in a motel with a door that didn't quite close tight. The humming came in through the little gap like it had rented the room next door. It had the same pitch. I put a towel at the bottom of the door like smoke was going to come in. I put pillows on top of the towel. I put the suitcase against the pillows. We lay awake and listened to the mountain tell us a bedtime story in our mother's voices. We went back the next morning, picked up the truck, and drove straight to the house with the intention of throwing our stuff in the back and driving until the mountains flattened. I left the engine running while we carried boxes. We didn't take the couch. We didn't take anything heavier than a laundry basket. I told myself we'd come back with a U-Haul once we had other people around. It felt like lying to a parent. We moved as if someone mean was napping. May went to the bedroom for her grandmother's quilt. She stopped in the doorway and said my name, not loud, not like a call. I went to her. She was standing very still. On the bedside table, her phone screen was lit. A new voice memo had appeared with the title, Lean. The timestamp said it had been recorded yesterday at 2:06 a.m., a time when we were in that awful motel. May touched it, because of course she did. The recording was the sound of our bedroom, then our whispers, scratched thin, like the phone had been under a pillow. Then the lullaby, my mother's and hers together, and over it, my own voice saying, "It's okay, baby. Come on, just look." I don't call May baby. I never have. She threw the phone onto the bed like it burned. We left it there. We put what we had in the truck and drove. We didn't say goodbye to Evelyn. We didn't lock the door. We made it as far as a gas station on the other side of town. Before we looked at each other and realized we were shaking hard enough to spill coffee, May said, "We can't just leave. Evelyn will think we should at least tell her." So we went back. That is the one decision I play in my head at 2 a.m., like a favorite track I hate. Evelyn was on her porch, braiding garlic. She looked at the half-loaded truck and nodded like she approved. "Good," she said. "You got sense." "We're going now," May said. Thank you. For the pie. For everything." "You'll come back," Evelyn said, like it wasn't a question or a blessing, just a fact about the world. I don't know why I said it. "Do you ever hear them in your house?" I asked. Evelyn's hands kept moving. "Sometimes they try the pipes," she said. I turned the radio up. "The deputy said not to answer the phone," I said. "He's right," she said. And then, like it had nothing to do with any of it, "If you ever have a baby, don't bring it here." We drove away with the windows down and didn't look. Back at the Hemlocks, the road climbed and fell, and the creek beside us kept doing its insistently normal creek thing. We got on the highway where the world flattens a little, and it felt like pushing through a screen. The air changed. Even the sunlight was different, thinner somehow. We drove all the way to May's cousin's place and slept like someone had lifted a boulder off our chests. We stayed away a week. May went back with her cousin's husband and 3 other men to get the big stuff, and they were there as a group, laughing too loud in that way men do when something is wrong with the dark. She said the well hummed twice, but none of them went down to listen. When the truck was full, she said, "I felt it in my teeth. Like a dentist drill. I don't know. It's a relief to be gone." It was. It still is, mostly. We rented a small apartment an hour and a half away with a leaky sink and neighbors who fight loudly about normal things like money and cigarettes. The first week, every time the pipes rattled, I flinched. May laughed at herself for jumping when the tea kettle sang. We went to a movie. We had pizza on a Thursday. We were ordinary. On our second Friday, there was a voicemail on my phone from a number with no label. I pressed play and heard road noise like someone had set a phone on a dashboard with the mic open. Then a voice I recognized but couldn't place said, friendly and tired, "Don't." Under it came the faint 2-note hum I hear now when the microwave runs or when I press my ear to the pillow. I deleted it and emptied the trash. I told myself I'd butt-dialed myself. A week after that, Evelyn called May. "Y'all doing okay?" she asked. "I brought over your package." Mail got mixed again. They talked about the weather. They talked about bean beetles. Then Evelyn said very gently, "You tell your fella he shouldn't have said that thing about coffee. It makes smart where nothing needs it." May repeated it to me after she hung up. "She heard the well say your sentence," she said, "but you said it in the kitchen." We stared at each other. It felt like looking at a photo of yourself taken before your face knew it was a face. We don't talk about it much now. When we do, we use present tense. The well sings. The well hums. The well says things. I keep waiting for those verbs to slide back into was. Some nights I wake at 2:06 with my heart running a sprint and I listen to the apartment building breathe. There is always a refrigerator somewhere, a neighbor's shower turning on, a bus going by. I catalog those sounds like proof of life. Sometimes, when the water in the bathroom stops and the pipes tick in their little dying way, I hear 2 notes steady as a metronome, and it takes everything I have not to get up and put my ear to the drain. We went back once at the end of summer to mow. The yard had gone ragged. Goldenrod nodded over the swings. The hemlocks looked exactly the same. The cap on the well had darkened like an old bruise. There was a ring around the ring bolt, wetter than the rest. The humming wasn't there. Not even a whisper. We worked for 2 hours, sweat-soaked, laughing a little in that relieved way you do when the thing you're terrified of fails to show up. We were about to leave when May stopped and looked down at the stones and said softly, "Do you hear?" I shook my head. I didn't. She put her fingers in her ears like a child and stood that way for a full minute. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said, too bright. We locked the front door. We got in the truck. Driving up the road, I looked back, without meaning to, and saw through the trees the round of the cap like a blind eye. That night, back at the apartment, we were in bed when my phone lit up. The screen said, "Mom." I stared at it until it stopped. The voicemail icon appeared. I pressed and listened to 60 seconds of silence, and then my mother's voice, thinner than radio, said, "Shh, shh, lean." I didn't tell May. I deleted it and I lied. The next morning, my mother called for real and complained about her knees and the neighbor's dog. She asked if we were coming down for Thanksgiving. "Of course," I said, and then, because I always have to pick at the seam, "Do you remember that song you used to hum for me when I was little?" "What song?" she said. "I don't sing." "Never mind," I said, and I pictured her in her kitchen, the bright fake fruit on the counter, the daylight doing its everyday work. I tried to hear a hum under her voice and didn't. I was grateful and I was not. So that's the story. I could dress it up, but I won't. There's a stone circle in a yard in a holler, one of 1,000, and at night it sings. If you go, you'll want to hear it closer. If you hear it, it learns. It tries the door handles of your life. If you lean, well, don't lean. May told me not to post this. She said it keeps the thought warm. She isn't wrong, but I keep thinking of the deputy and the hardware guy and old man Holcomb and Evelyn, all of them saying variations of the same thing in their plain voices. Keep the lid on. Don't pick up. Don't lean. There are warnings that sound like superstition until you need them, and by then, they're instructions. Sometimes late at night, when the building is quiet and the refrigerator is doing its slow, patient breath, I talk out loud just to fill the air with something I choose. I say things like, "I hear you," and "no thanks," and "not tonight." I do it knowing there's a half-beat in the world I can't see where something else could talk first. I do it because there's always water over stone somewhere, and a voice you recognize will always be the easiest one to follow. If you hear singing in the dark, your mom's voice, your own words braided together, walk away. Promise me. I'll keep this straight because that's the only way I know how to tell it. I'm a record driver, nights mostly. If you've ever broken down on Route 119 after midnight between Chapmanville and the Kentucky line, there's a decent chance. I was the one who rolled up behind your hazards and asked if you had it in park. My name's Jamie. I run a medium-duty flatbed out of a lot behind a muffler shop. The company name is big on the doors, but the truck is mine in all the ways that matter. I know every rattle it makes and which switch has to be jiggled in winter to get the work lights to kick on. I'm not skittish. I've crawled under cars on the shoulder with semis thundering past close enough to make my vest flap like a flag. I've pulled people out of ditches who were more embarrassed than hurt, and people out of vehicles who were the opposite. I've washed blood off the deck at dawn and gone in for pancakes like it was just road grime. You don't do this long if you can't close a mental door. When folks talk about Route 119, they talk about the grades and the fog and how your radio station turns to snow right when you want one decent song. If you work nights around here, you hear one more thing a lot. The black dog. It's not a tourist thing. It's not painted on a mural or printed on a t-shirt at the gas station. It's a thing people say in quiet, like the weather. Truckers mention it when they set their coffee down and rub a line in the condensation with a finger. State troopers mention it when they tell you to put more triangles out than you think you need. Janelle at the Sunoco says it like she's talking about a neighbor who keeps to himself. Everyone talks around it the same way. Something big runs the shoulder. At night, like it was born knowing the line, no sound from the pause, eyes like there's a low fire inside. Don't swerve. Don't brake hard. If you see it, hold your lane and let your heartbeat do what it does. I heard all that for years and figured it was the kind of story that keeps people awake. The first time I thought maybe it wasn't just a story. I wasn't even on a job. I was deadheading home around 2 a.m, cab smelling like coffee and winter air. Road gray and greasy with mist. My radio did that thing where it clicks like someone tapped their fingernail against the mic. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a breath, long and steady, the kind you hear when a sleeping kid rolls over. I picked up my mic and said, "You got a hotkey?" Nobody answered. I told myself it was crosstalk from across the county, and I told myself that again when my own voice came back at me a second later from the speaker, slowed down like a tape saying, "Hotkey." I didn't see anything that night. Seeing isn't the only way to know you're not alone. At the shop, we keep the night at arm's length with dumb jokes. My friend Luis, who runs the other wrecker when his back isn't acting up, tells a story about a dog pacing him and then crossing the lane like it wanted to be hit. He says he didn't feel a bump, but he stopped anyway because his stomach said he had to. He set triangles and walked back, and there was a single glove in the road where he thought there'd be a body. It was his glove. He says he doesn't tell people that part because it sounds fake. I asked him if he still had it. He said yes. He kept it in the toolbox for a while until his sockets started going missing, and then he put it in the glove compartment and forgot about it on purpose. Later, when I told him my piece of this story, he said, "You never get just one weird thing out there. If the road decides to introduce itself, it says the whole name." I'll skip ahead to the night. It was late January, the air full of that thin cold that creeps through your jacket like it has the right to be there. The lot was a glassy mess from a day of melt and refreeze. Dispatch sent me to a blacked-out sedan with a dead battery near a pull-off by Sandlick, a stretch of 119 that is a rumor in fog. I had a thermos under the seat and half a bologna sandwich in the door pocket. The truck started on the second crank. I let the idle settle, and while I waited, I looked over at the passenger seat. There was a boot there, not mine, left side, scuffed like it had been used for everything but walking. I blinked, picked it up on instinct, and then remembered I had asked Luis for his glove story the night before, and he had brought me the glove as a joke, and I must have dropped it under the seat and kicked it up into the light when I got in. That was what my head said. The thing in my hand wasn't a glove, it was a boot. I put it back on the seat like it was a stranger's coffee I'd picked up by mistake and told myself to stop borrowing other people's ghosts. The sedan's hazards were throwing red up the fog, soft and even like a heartbeat under a blanket. The driver was a college kid and the passenger was his girlfriend. Both were polite in that way you get after midnight when someone with a truck shows up. The kid said his battery light had been on for a week and he'd rolled the dice and lost. I hooked the charger, checked the terminals, and made conversation. They were quiet, shivering. I told them my old line about how at least they'd picked a romantic place to break down, and pointed up into the dark where the cliffs are if you could see them. The girl smiled with just the corners of her mouth. When the engine turned over, the kid looked like he'd been handed back an hour of his life. He shook my hand twice. I told them to keep it running for 15 minutes and get that alternator checked. They promised. As I was rolling my cable, I felt it. Not the air changing, not a sound. A tension, like a lid came off the night and something looked in. You know that feeling when you realize someone's standing behind you on a job and you didn't hear them walk up? That mild flush of embarrassment because you weren't the first to know. I looked up the shoulder. The fog made a tunnel and the tunnel made a mirror. Something moved 100 feet away just inside the white line. I don't know how big it was because fog lies, but it ate up distance in a way my brain put in the category of animal. The girl saw me look. She looked too. She whispered, "Dog?" In the kind of voice people use when they want something to be small, I said, "Probably." Because I wanted her to keep the door closed and the seatbelt on and not wedge herself between me and whatever the night was bringing. It ran along the shoulder and then it didn't run. It slid. The paws were there if you looked for the rhythm, but the sound wasn't. The red from the hazards lit the fog, and the fog lit the eyes, if you could call them that. Ember is the word people use. That's what they looked like to me. Not bright, not cute, not glow in the dark. Like something had been burning for a long time and decided all it needed from light anymore was to be seen. I kept rolling cable, because if I stopped, I knew I wouldn't start again. The thing kept pace, and then it slowed, like it was deciding about us. The kid said, "Dude," under his breath. The girl said, "Don't," and I didn't know who she was talking to. I said, "Stay put," because that was my job, and I walked to the back of my truck like the distance I made with the two of them would make a difference if the world decided to get strange. The radio clicked, tap, tap, tap. I reached for the mic and realized my hand was shaking. You don't want to show people that on a roadside at night. They need your hands to be boring. I took a breath like I was blowing dust off a shelf and keyed up. Unit 9 to anyone near Sandlick. You see a stray on the shoulder? The speaker answered with my voice saying, stray, but drawn out, heavy with a weight I didn't put in it. The kid in the sedan remembered something from YouTube or a cousin and said, is this that thing? I said it wasn't. I said it was just a dog pacing my rig because trucks can pull them like boats pull gulls. I said a lot of things. The shape closed another 10 feet and I ran out of sentences. It didn't lunge. It didn't show teeth or make a sound. It did the one thing I now know means you are part of the story whether you like it or not. It turned, its head in my direction without stopping. Not all the way. Just enough that I knew it knew I was there. The red light from the hazards made the world feel slow. The fog turned the road into a room. I thought about how you hold a ladder for someone not because you have to, but because it's what you do when they're higher than they should be. I don't know why that thought was the one I had, but it was, and it made sense of how my hands found the flares and how I walked into the lane like a flagman at a work site. I put one flare down far, one middle, one close. I told the kid to keep his foot on the brake and not get cute. I told him I would stand where the next guy would see me in time. When I stepped into the lane, the dog moved with me, keeping my pace at the edge of the light like it wasn't alone in the job. The next set of headlights bled up out of the curve fast enough to make me want to swallow my throat. A pickup with one bright fog lamp and a deer guard. I held up both arms and did the slow roll with my hand that says, bring it down, bring it down. The driver braked, and the nose of his truck dipped like a nod. He drifted past me into the open lane and gave me a look that said thanks and also said he would tell this story later, in a way that made him look braver. I watched his taillights shrink and then glanced left. The dog wasn't there. For half a breath I thought I'd imagined it. Then the radio clicked once more and a breath came through the speaker that wasn't mine and wasn't anyone's I could name, and I knew I hadn't imagined anything. The sedan left. I picked up the flares and the triangles, checked the shoulder in a slow circle with the flashlight and walked back to my cab. On the passenger seat, where I swear to you there had been nothing but the old map book and a bag of zip ties, sat a single glove. Not Luis's, not mine. It was black, thick, the type you buy in a mining supply store because it's made for hands that live around rough metal. The back of it had a smear of coal dust ground into the stitching, and when I picked it up, my name was written inside the cuff in a Sharpie I recognized from my own kitchen drawer. I went very still, the way you do when a dog you don't know puts its paw on your knee and you're waiting to see if it presses harder. The road noise came back in, a low hum you can pretend is ocean if you're in the mood. I put the glove under the seat like I was hiding something from a kid. I sat there and breathed until my fingers stopped tingling. I told myself I was tired. I told myself 1,000 things. Then I took a picture of the glove with my phone because I didn't want to wake up in the morning and have it not be there, and wonder if the part of my brain that keeps me between the lines had decided it was done doing me favors. When I got back to the lot, Luis was standing by the door smoking and trying to make it look like he wasn't. He flicked the cigarette into the snow when he saw my face. He said, "What happened?" In a way that didn't give me a lot of room for lies. I told him, "Not all of it. Enough." He grew quiet like a storm rounding a hill. He nodded at the truck. "Show me," he said. I unlocked the passenger door. I reached under the seat. My fingers touched the glove. I pulled it out. He took it like it might drip. He turned it over. He put it back in my hand like it belonged to me. "Keep it in there," he said, nodding at the cab. "Don't bring that in here." He tried to laugh and couldn't find the sound. "Add it to your collection." "I don't have a collection," I said. "Everybody out here collects something," he said. "You ever notice that? You and me, we collect favors." "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "Something warned you. You listened. That's a favor. You owe back." I slept in the office for an hour at dawn because I didn't want to drive home with the glove under the seat like a passenger, and I didn't want to throw it away Every dumb horror movie you've ever seen tells you not to throw the thing away. Keep it safe. Feed it a name. I left it there like I could put the night in park and go off shift. For a while, nothing happened. Nothing for Route 119, which is, to say just the usual. A box truck driver who thought a parking brake was optional. A car with a broken ball joint that folded the wheel under like it was tired of standing. A trooper named Stone, who always looked three-quarters done with whatever conversation he was in, even if it was your first hello. He'd stop behind me, at scenes in that careful angle way they teach them, lights turning slow, and ask if I needed a lane or a hand. He's one of those guys who looks too young in the hat and too old without it. He knew the dog story. You could tell by what he didn't say. The glove stayed cold when everything else in the cab went warm. The only time it wasn't cold was when I pulled to the shoulder near Sand Lake without meaning to, and sat there like I was waiting for someone. The glove was warm then, like it had been on a hand. When I picked it up, it gave off the faintest smell of wet metal, like the inside of a pipe after a storm. I told myself to quit. Not the job, the paying attention. There's a way to live where you let the strange sit in the corner and eat quiet, and there's a way where you go put a bowl down in front of it and call it by your name. I was doing too much of the second one. I tried to do more of the first. I muted the radio when it clicked. I kept my eyes on the white line and not the shoulder. When folks brought up the dog at Lulu's diner, I sawed my pancakes into serious shapes and asked about the weather like an old man. Then the night came that I think about when I reach for the mic now. The night that wasn't just a warning for me. It was a warning for somebody else. Dispatch sent me out for a rollover near mile marker onto 19. Private pickup. No injuries reported. Trooper en route. I asked which trooper and they said Stone. I had a feeling like I'd swallowed a small rock and it was taking its time finding a place to sit. The fog wasn't thick, but it was the active kind. The kind that moves like it wants to remind you. Wind exists even when you can't feel it. I drove the posted speed because it was what I tell everyone else to do, and because when it's your turn to be the example, you should at least be tidy about it. The truck was on its side, grill dented, the bed twisted like a corkscrew. It looked like someone had grabbed it by the back bumper and tried to wring it out. The driver, a man about my age with a ball cap that said a roofing company and a look that said he could fix anything but this, was standing by the guardrail, making a phone call to a voice that was not happy. Stone had his cruiser at that perfect angle, one light bar set to steady burn so nobody would fixate on the spin. I put triangles out, then flares, then a cone I had in the back because sometimes it makes people feel better to see the official shape. Stone gave me the nod. I gave it back. We did the dance you do when everyone knows everyone else's job. The driver kept saying he didn't hit anything. He kept saying he swerved for nothing, and that was the problem, that it wasn't for a deer or a person, just for a feeling. He said it 3 times. The third time he said it, I heard the taps on my radio. 1, 2, 3. Then a breath. I didn't touch the mic. Stone's head shifted the smallest bit in my direction, like he'd heard it too. He looked at me and then at the shoulder. I looked where he looked. The dog was pacing the outer edge of the scene, outside the lights, where the dark was not the kind you can fix with a switch. You know when someone is just inside a room watching you and you can't see them, and then the light catches one small part of their face and your brain builds the rest? That. A curve of back that didn't so much rise as suggest the idea of rising. A line of motion that was too clean to be a man. And those eyes. Not bright. Present. The roofing guy didn't see it. He was still talking to a voice that was not forgiving him for being human. I felt something like instruction, and when I say that, I know how it sounds. My body did it before my head did. I stepped out farther into the lane and put my hand up, at an angle toward the oncoming bend, higher than I usually do. The next car came out of the turn way too fast and then corrected hard when it saw the cones like it had learned to drive 5 minutes ago. I kept my hand up, palm out like a stop sign, and I walked toward the center line at a pace that said I had done this before. The car shed speed like it was letting go of an argument. It slid by, slow now. A second set of headlights appeared behind it, just as hot. The dog, because I am done saying shape, moved with me along the shoulder, arthritis-free, soundless, eyes steady. If you had asked me in that moment if it was a good thing or a bad thing, I would have said yes. We got the pickup cleaned up without anyone playing bumper cars. The driver signed where Stone told him, eyes still stuck to the pages like they were going to say what he wanted them to say if he squinted. He walked over to me before he left and said, "What made you step out when you did?" I shrugged. "You learn not to feed people the parts of the truth that make them look over their shoulder in broad daylight. You can feel them coming too hot sometimes," I said. "The air tells you." He nodded like that sounded like physics. When the scene was clear, Stone walked to my passenger door without being asked, opened it and leaned in. He didn't touch anything. He looked under the seat without bending. "You still got it?" he asked. "Got what?" He looked at me for a second that was a little longer than normal. In that second I saw him decide something. He said, "The glove." "I have a glove," I said. "Don't leave it under the seat when you go up there," he said, meaning the Sandlick bend without saying it. "Put it on the dash where you can see it. You'll drive different if it can see you back." I don't know why that sounded right, but it did. After he drove off, I put the glove on the dash crooked so it wouldn't slide. It looked stupid, like a hand trying to hitch a ride. I drove the length of road I always drive. It was the same. I was the one different. I kept my foot light even when the grade offered to carry me. Twice I felt that pull of attention off the shoulder, that weight of eyes feeling, and twice the glove seemed to be warmer against the glass. Or maybe it was my brain trying to invent a dial I could turn. 2 nights later, the glove wasn't on the dash when I got in. I thought I'd left it on the seat. It wasn't there either. I checked under the seat and felt nothing but empty air. I'm not proud of how quickly my heart beat for something that weighs less than a pound. I drove anyway. Nothing happened until I stopped at the Sunoco for coffee and Janelle said, "You left your friend out there." I said I didn't bring anyone. She pointed through the glass. On the step just outside the door sat the glove, palm up like it had been set down with a kind of care. There was a faint black outline under it on the concrete like heat leaves when it lifts off metal. Janelle didn't make a joke. She picked it up with 2 fingers, handed it to me like a receipt and said, "Don't make it wait to ride next time." I kept it on the dash after that. I put it by the door when I went home on days off. Sometimes there'd be 2 gloves, for an hour, mine and mine, and then I'd blink and I'd be looking at one with the Sharpie letters smudged different than I wrote them. Once there were none until I started the truck, and then it was there, like I'd just remembered it into being. I know how it sounds. I wouldn't believe me either if I hadn't had to move it off the seat to take a nap more than once. I want to tell you it all adds up to a lesson. People like neat endings. I like neat endings. I like a signed invoice and a truck on all 4 wheels. The truth is less tidy. Here's what I think I learned. If you run nights on 1919 and something shows up at the edge of your light, treat it like a coworker who doesn't talk much. Don't get cute. Don't test it to see what happens. If your radio taps 3 times and the breath that follows sounds like someone telling you to behave in a language you don't quite know, assume they're right. The black dog, whatever it is, doesn't push. It paces. It tells you where not to make your mistake. It gives you a chance to owe a favor. This morning, after another nothing happened night except a guy in a box truck who learned what black ice is and a fox that decided my cones were interesting, I opened the door to my house and put my boots on the mat. 2 boots. That's what it looked like. Mine. Except when I touched the left one, it was warm like it had been worn and my socks were dry, and I had just unknotted my laces. There was coal dust on the step we just scrubbed yesterday. The cat walked around, the prints in a lazy circle like it was avoiding an invisible puddle. I told myself I'd track something home. I told myself a lot. Then I put the glove on the shelf by the door because it felt rude to leave it in the truck on a Sunday. I'm writing this because a new guy on the band last night, voice bright with the kind of energy you have before the road takes it, said, "Who keeps whistling on the radio?" And then half a mile later he said, "I think I just saw a big dog." And he made the word dog into something wider. I keyed up and said, "I keep it straight." He laughed and said he was good. Then my radio tapped, 1, 2, 3. And he didn't say another word for the rest of the stretch. You don't have to believe me. Maybe you've never heard a breath come through your speaker that was your own voice twisted just enough. Maybe you've never seen eyes that don't belong to any head, hold steady at the edge of your world. Maybe you don't run nights on this road at all. That's fine. This is for the one person who will. The one person who will pull on to 119 when the hour is thin and the fog can't decide if it wants to be helpful or not. And who will feel that attention raise like heat off a summer hood. And who will decide between touching the brake and holding their lane. Hold your lane. If something paces you, let it. If something turns its head in your direction without stopping, take the hint. Put your hazards on and be the sign you wish someone else had been for you. If you find a glove or a boot, or anything that reminds you of yourself in the place where you're sure an animal should have been, pick it up and keep it where you can see it. You'll drive different. That's all this is. Different enough. I started this saying, I know how to tell it straight. That's still true. The last straight thing is this. Sometimes the road gives you something you can hold so you'll stop pretending you didn't see what you saw. Sometimes it leaves a glove on your passenger seat and writes your name inside it with your own hand. So when you reach for the mic later and a breath you recognize says, don't, you won't argue. You'll listen. You'll owe back the favor to somebody you don't know yet. You'll step into the lane and put your hand up at the right second. You'll get a stranger home. It's getting dark. I'm about to go out again. The glove is on the dash. I didn't put it there. I don't mind. I locked the door twice out of habit and then unlocked it because I remembered the cat is still outside. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when the night looks at you, it is always better to meet it at the threshold than to make it come and find you. If the dog runs with me tonight, I'll keep my foot steady. If the radio taps, I'll say, I hear you. If nothing happens except a long hum of tires and a handful of people who needed a hand and got one, I'll come home and set my boots by the door and try not to count to 2. If there's 3, I'll try not to think too much about whose they are. If you ever break down out there and a truck pulls up and a guy in a yellow vest steps into the lane with his hand up like he has a right to slow other people down, and if you see something that isn't a person pace the edge of the light with him like it's part of the job, you don't have to say anything about it. Just keep it in park. Keep your foot on the brake so your lights tell the truth. Let us work. We're not the only ones on that road trying to get you home. I don't know how to make this sound reasonable, so I'm just going to say it the way it happened. If anybody from Clay County reads this and wants to tell me I'm an idiot, go ahead. I already know. I hunt public land every fall and I'm careful. I carry paper maps, I leave a note on the kitchen table with the gate number and the ridge I'm aiming for. I text my buddy when I move stands. I'm not the guy who wanders into the woods in sneakers with a phone at 2%. I grew up in these hills. I know what a holler feels like when it's about to rain. I know the way sound travels through wet trees and how a creek will trick you into thinking it's a road when your headlamp is dim and you're tired. This was the second week of November a few years back, right after the clocks changed. I took Friday off because a cold front was coming and I wanted to be on the ridge when the wind turned. I left my place in Clay at 3 in the afternoon, planning to camp out in the truck so I could hike in before dawn. It was that gray daylight that looks like evening all day long. The kind you get in the mountains when the sky sits right on your head and you smell wood smoke from a mile away. My buddy Lucas was supposed to meet me at a gas station north of Ivydale to look over maps. He called and said he'd be late. His transmission was acting up. Don't go pushing too far without me, he said. Those logging cuts up there don't match any of the apps. The timber company maps are from the 90s. I'll hang near the gate, I said. I'll text once I'm parked. The last place to get decent cell service was the little general store with the faded RC Cola sign and a hand-lettered board that said, Liver Mush Fridays. The old men on the bench out front were playing checkers like they do every afternoon. Mr. Ashby was there. He runs the bait shop in season and knows every holler and creek rumor within 2 counties. He saw the bow case in my back seat and told me the rut was weird this year. Slow to start. Don't go past Turpentine Branch if you're by yourself, he added, like he was commenting on the weather. New road washed out. And if you see that old farmhouse down there, don't get curious. What farmhouse? I asked, half laughing. I thought the end of that track is just a berm and a cable. It is, he said, scratching his cheek. Most days. He said it casually, like he'd said it before, then looked away like he was done. It bothered me more than it should have. I drove up past the church where the parking lot doubles as a school bus turnaround, and then further, past the last trailer with Christmas lights still half up, and then into the dark. The road turned to ruts, and then to 2 tracks, and then I hit the gate. The timber company had run a cable between 2 maples, and there was room for the truck to nose in and get off the road. I backed up until my bumper touched brush, put the parking brake on, and texted Lucas. Parked at gate 7, Turpentine Branch. If you make it, I'm here. If not, see you at daylight, no bars. The message hung there with a little circle spinning. I put the phone on the dash and ate a sandwich while the woods settled. Every couple minutes, a gust would push through the tops and shake the last brown leaves like rattles. I checked my topo and ran my finger along the contour lines up to a saddle that looked promising. 2 ridges pinched a little bowl. If I left at 4:30, I could be tucked into a blowdown before first light. I set up the driver's seat so I could sleep a few hours. I'm good at sleeping in trucks. I rolled my jacket into a pillow and cracked the window for fresh air. The sound that comes off a creek at night climbs up and sits in a truck cab like a third person. You keep thinking you hear someone breathing. Woke up at some dark hour to rain on the windshield. Not heavy, just a mist that turns the whole world gray and slick. When I started the engine to run heat for a minute, the headlights flashed and I saw fog stacked in layers over the road like sheets. My phone was still searching. I turned the engine off and listened to the rain clicking in the leaves and something else under it, a little hollow talk sound somewhere ahead. When the wind shifted, it stopped. When it shifted back, it started again. I told myself it was a drip, hitting a bucket in the bed of somebody's truck or the belly of an old culvert. I was half asleep when I opened the door and stepped out with my headlamp to take a leak. The cold hit and woke me up better than coffee. My beam of light cut through the low fog and made the closest things loom and the far things fall away. I panned it across the cable gate, the mud ruts, the saplings with orange blazes, and right past the gate, 30 yards down the road, stood a house. Not a nice one. Not a cabin either. A small, flat-faced farmhouse with sad shoulders, every board, gray as a tombstone. It leaned like a person with a bad knee. It had a porch that sagged in the middle and a porch swing that was tilted like it was about to slide off its chains. The windows were empty, no glass, and the door was a darker dark in the middle. The roof was patched with tar paper that flapped, a little where a corner was loose. I stood there with steam coming off my breath and felt a stupid shame, the kind you feel when you realize you've missed something obvious. The road must bend, and I never noticed it. Of course, there's an old place tucked down here. Old places are everywhere in these hollers. Some family left in the 50s, and it's been rotting ever since. Only I'd been parked there for an hour, and I hadn't seen it. And I hadn't heard a thing except that drip sound. And the ground in front of the cable gate was undisturbed. Wet leaves fluffing up like little hands if anything bigger than a rabbit walked through. The house was past the cable. Nothing had passed the cable. This is where people say they would have left. I didn't. I told myself I was tired and making something out of nothing. I stepped over the cable, boots sinking in soft mud, and walked far enough to see the whole thing. The porch boards were dark with wet and bowed with age. There was a milk crate with some jars in it by the door, full of cloudy water like they'd been left out in rain for years. A metal wash basin leaned upside down and made that talk sound when the drips found it. That explained that, at least. I played my light through the doorway. There were no walls inside, not like rooms, just one. Open space with empty door frames leaning into air. The wallpaper that was left had a faded pattern of little blue flowers. Everything else was gray and moss green. It had that smell old wood gets when it's more moss than wood. And under it was a cold, iron smell like an old set of keys. I walked to the porch, planning to step up for a look and then go back to the truck. The porch gave a little under my hand, like it breathed when I touched it. The swing rocked a fraction of an inch, though the air was still. The porch posts wore little bird nests like hats. I stood with my boot on the first step and decided no. I didn't want my weight on any of those boards. I backed off and walked the perimeter instead, pointing my headlamp around to prove to myself it was just a wrecked place at the end of a road. On the far side were low bushes and a drop into a little ditch full of leaves. My light hit something white stuck half under the leaves, and for a second my brain told me it was bone. I crouched and brushed it. It was a kid's shoe. White leather, the kind with the stiff ankle, like a baby's first walking shoe. It was soaked and mud had pressed into the stitching. I flipped it over and didn't know why my stomach went cold until I realized what was bothering me. The shoe was clean inside. Not just clean. Dry people leave trash and junked appliances and broken glass out in these woods. They don't leave a single clean baby shoe pushed under a leaf like a beetle hiding from a bird. I put it back down. I told myself a raccoon dragged it from somebody's trash. I walked around the back and found the chimney stack fallen off in one red heap. In the heap were glass marbles like bubbles, the kind kids trade in quart jars. They looked like eyes underwater. I took 2 without thinking why and slid them into my pocket like lucky stones. When I got back to the front, it was fully dark. The rain was just enough to beat on my jacket and make the world small. I told myself I was being dumb. The porch is drier than the truck. I'll sit here and drink coffee for a minute and wait for my nerves to settle. Then I'll go back and sleep like I planned. I put my foot on the porch again and watched the boards, and when they didn't move, I put my weight on the edge and sat on the top step with my boots 2 steps down. I set my thermos beside me. The swing creaked a tiny bit and settled. It only felt wrong when I stopped moving. It wasn't a feeling like I was being watched, it was a feeling like I was being counted. It went up my back like somebody ticking numbers with a pencil. I kept looking at the doorway because my body made me, and the doorway was just black. But my eyes kept snagging on the edges of the windows where the wet wood made dark streaks, like fingers. I drank coffee and it went from a comfort to a thin excuse. Something small rolled across the boards behind me and rested against my boot. I didn't look right away. I told myself it was something I kicked when I sat down. Then I looked, because that's how it works. It was a marble, clear with a blue twist inside. I flicked my light back toward the corner where the chimney debris was, but of course I couldn't see that from where I was. The marble looked clean, rain-beaded. I hadn't taken my hand out of my jacket pocket since I sat, and when I reached into it, I felt the 2 marbles I took, cold as ice. The one against my boot was a third. I told myself the wind or an animal or gravity had done me a favor and rolled it to me. I tried to drink more coffee, but my hand shook and I clinked the lid against the thermos, and that made too much noise in the big quiet. Somewhere down in the ditch, leaves rustled and then stopped. A minute later, the porch boards made a little sound like they were settling under somebody not heavy. Then I heard it for the first time, not with my ears really, but in that place, in your brain where you hear a memory. A line of kids saying a word altogether soft. The word was here. I stood up so fast my knee hit the thermos and knocked it down the steps. It bounced and thumped into wet leaves and laid there as if somebody should pick it up. I left it where it was and tried to back down the steps without turning my back on the doorway. The swing creaked once. The rain ticked on the basin. The house had no smell, and then all at once it did, like wet wool and a warm blanket you pull out of a trunk. That might have been in my head. I don't know. I got back over the cable and onto the road and felt like a line snapped tight and let me go. I walked faster than I meant to back to the truck. The cab light on the passenger side was on. I didn't leave it on. I stood still in the rain watching my own truck like it was a person who might turn. The light clicked off by itself. That scared me worse than if it had stayed on. I opened the driver's door and got in. The cab smelled like creek mud, not dirt. Mud that's been sitting with leaves in it. I knew that smell from every childhood afternoon I spent damming up little runs with my cousins. I shined my headlamp over the passenger seat. The cloth was wet. Not soaked through, but wet like somebody sat there in clothes that had been in a creek. I felt under me. My seat was dry. The floor mat on the passenger side squished when I poked it. I locked the doors and started the truck. The headlights made the rain a wall. Out past the cable, I could see the porch posts and the swing looking sideways like a tilted grin. I dropped the truck into reverse to turn around, and my rear tires spun and dug into the mud. I eased off, rocked it, gave it a little more. We climbed out. I said out loud, settled down like I was talking to a horse. Before I left, I got out to throw my wet mat in the bed so it wouldn't stink up the cab. I walked to the passenger side and opened the door. A white shape fell onto my boot. I thought, for one dumb second, it was a bird. It was a shoe. A tiny white leather shoe. The same as the one under the leaves, except dry inside. I picked it up and it left a small print on my pant leg like a kid had pressed a foot there. I leaned into the cab to grab the mat, and that's when I really saw it. The back seat was full. Not jammed, not piled to the ceiling, but full like a trunk at a yard sale. Kids' shoes. Every kind and size and year. Saddle shoes browned with age. Glow-in-the-dark sneakers from the 90s. Pink plastic flip-flops. Tiny brown boots with fake spurs. Church shoes with scuffs over the toes. The smell of wet leather and creak. A pair of red rubber boots stood side by side like somebody had just stepped out of them carefully. They were all wet with clean mud. The kind you get when floodwater takes silt over a lawn. My light made the water shine on them like they were breathing. I didn't think anything at all for a second. I was blank. Then my brain came roaring back and started offering stupid explanations. A prank. Trash somebody kept. A hoarder stash. A dump I parked near and somehow didn't notice. It didn't fit. None of it fit. I dropped the shoe I was holding like it was hot. It landed toe down in the mud and stood there for a second before falling on its side. I shut the door and my hand shook so hard the keys clacked. I drove away. I didn't look back. I told myself I'd worry about turning around at the next wide spot. The road felt longer going out than coming in. I drove like my life depended on not stalling. When I hit pavement again, it felt like I'd come up out of water. I drove to the general store without deciding to, and pulled into the lot too fast. The men on the bench looked up slow. I parked crooked and went inside without even closing my door. The girl at the counter, whose name I should know because she's rung up my coffee for years, looked at me and went pale. I realized I was muddy to the waist with some leaf stuck to my jacket like a badge. I said words at her that probably didn't make sense. "Can I use... Do you have..." She slid the bathroom key across the counter. I didn't even make it to the back. My legs gave out near the drink cooler. Mr. Ashby was behind me without me hearing him. He put a hand on my shoulder like a father. "What did you see?" he said. Not a question. Just the way you say time to take the roast out. "A house," I said. "Past gate 7, past the cable, right there at the end of the track." I sat on the porch like an idiot. When I got back to the truck, I didn't want to say it. Saying it felt like making it more real. They put something in my back seat. He nodded once, slow. "Shoes," he said. "Children's shoes." The girl at the counter made a sound deep in her throat that might have been a prayer or a curse. Mr. Ashby steered me out to the lot like I was a child. He looked in the back seat and let out a breath that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. "You weren't supposed to sit," he said, talking to nobody in particular. "You weren't supposed to make them think you was waiting." A white county SUV rolled in. Deputy Cates got out with his thumbs hooked in his vest like he always does, trying to look in charge of whatever. He saw the shoes, went still, then looked everywhere except at my truck for a long 10 seconds. "Let's not have a crowd," he said to the men, who had already made a crowd. "Jonah, tell me what you did, from the gate forward, and do not leave out any part where you might have taken anything from the property." I had forgotten the marbles in my pocket until he said that. The guilt that flashed through me felt childish and giant at the same time. I took my hand out and opened it. The 2 cold circles lay in my palm like sleeping eyes. "Throw them back," Mr. Ashby said quietly. "Throw them back in the creek on your way home." Deputy Cates made me drive back with him following and his lights off. "You don't get out," he said. "You don't touch the cable. We're just confirming a thing that either is or isn't, then you're going home." When we got there was nothing past the cable but wet road and black puddles and leaves shining like fish scales. No house, no porch. The wash basin wasn't there. The jar crate wasn't there. The track ended in a mound of dozed earth, like a tongue pressed to a closed mouth. "There," Kate said and pointed at nothing. "There is what I expected to find." "What is happening to me?" I asked, feeling like a little kid again. My voice sounded like it was coming through a long pipe. "You're going to go home," he said. "You're going to shower, you're going to put those marbles in moving water, you're going to put your clothes out on the porch tonight and leave your shoes upside down. In the morning, you're going to take what's in your back seat to the old cemetery by the school and set them by the steps, all of them. And you're going to say out loud that you're sorry for taking a rest." "That's it," I said. "That's the solution." He looked dead ahead at the wet cable. "No solutions here," he said. "Just manners." I did what he said. At a pull-off over a creek, I tossed the marbles one at a time and watched them disappear without a ripple, which is impossible, but I watched it happen. At home, I stripped on the porch and left my clothes there like a bad smell. I turned my boots upside down. I slept in clean socks with the bedroom window cracked, though it was cold. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke to a sound like a bus door opening and closing. It came from nowhere. It came from right outside. At first light, I loaded my truck in silence because it felt wrong to speak. I drove to the schoolhouse, cemetery. It sits on a little knoll, and there's a worn set of concrete steps that lead to nothing because the old wooden church burned back in the 70s. I carried the shoes up in my arms in big awkward piles, and the leather squeaked and the plastic clicked like teeth. I set them in neat rows by the steps. It took me more than an hour. I didn't count them. I didn't want to know that number. An old woman walking her dog stopped and watched me without speaking. When I was done, she nodded once like I'd mowed a community strip of grass. I said I was sorry out loud because Deputy Cates told me to, and because it felt like the only thing to say. I meant it. The old woman turned away with her dog without a word. I wish I could say that was the end. It wasn't. It wasn't dramatic either. It was a slow leak. The smell of wet, cold wool that followed me sometimes without a source. The little mud prints that appeared by the edge of my welcome mat after a rain when nobody had visited. A marble that rolled across my workbench by itself and tapped the clamp like a knuckle. I put the boots I wore that night upside down and left them like that for a week. When I finally turned them over, the insoles were damp with a thin gray silt line, as neat as if someone had poured it on with a spoon. I stopped hunting that ridge. Lucas made fun of me because he thinks everything is tall tales until it happens, right in front of him. He kept trying to get me to go up there for shed hunting in the spring, and I kept telling him no thanks. He went without me twice and said he never saw any house. He also said a doe walked right through a place he would have sworn was solid brush, and the space she walked through looked like the shape of a porch until she passed. He laughed when he said it. The laugh didn't reach his eyes. A month after it happened, I was at the general store late past dark because I'd lost track of time drinking coffee and jawing about nothing in particular. The checkers board was put away and the men were already talking about trout season because that's how time moves here. Mr. Ashby came in from the dark and took off his hat and held it in both hands, which is the posture you take when you are about to talk about something you don't want to talk about. "It used to be a little settlement down there," he said, like I had asked him just then, though I hadn't. "Before the real road, before the TVA put in the flood control, family folks. They say the house I warned you about was the last one left when the jobs dried and the school closed. They say a flood came in spring one year and turned that road into a creek you could float a stove on. Folks ran up on that porch to get out of it. The mamas put the little ones up on the swing because it was higher, because when your baby is knee-high, you think 18 inches is a wall. The water didn't get them that night. The sickness did after. Who knows the truth? That's just what they say." "Then what is it I saw?" I asked. "A memory. A trick. Sometimes a place remembers being a house as hard as a person remembers being a kid," he said. "Sometimes it wants to be what it was and it needs people to help it. It will take anything you give it that looks like life. It will take sitting on the step like waiting. It will take marbles and little shoes and the sound of counting. You gave it all that without meaning to. Be more careful what you give." That's where he left it. He won't say the name of the branch down there after sundown. He calls it the end, like it's a person's name. I moved in with my girlfriend for a while the next winter because every time it rained, I felt like the walls of my house leaned in a little. It was worse on the nights when the creek by the school got loud. She didn't like me sniffing the air at the door like a dog, but she put up with it. She put a jar of marbles on her kitchen windowsill because she thought it was cute, and she didn't understand why I took it down, poured them into my hand, and carried them like I was holding eggs. I told her I don't keep marbles in the house anymore. She laughed and then saw my face and stopped. Now I keep the truck clean. I keep a little prayer from my grandma's Bible folded under the floor mat. I stop at the school steps sometimes on my way to work, like visiting family graves. The shoes never stay long. Some church ladies must move them, or kids take them, or the county throws them away. That's the normal answer, and I don't need another. Last week I thought I was doing better. The air had that dry cold that makes you want to stack wood and cook chili. I went out to the truck early and the stars were still bright enough to make your breath feel small. There was frost on the windshield in a pattern like lace, and for a second I thought that's pretty. And then I saw it for what it was. 10 tiny prints in 2 straight lines across the hood. 1 row in and 1 row out. Not cat, not raccoon. Shoes. The tread left little daisies where the rubber wore thin. I wiped them with my sleeve like that could unsay them. I started the truck and the defroster blew warm air that smelled like wet wool. I told myself 100 sensible lies before breakfast, and I'm running out. I don't go up Turpentine Branch anymore. I don't park near cable gates. I don't sit on old porch steps even if they look solid. If I see a sagging house in fog, I turn around, whether it took a road to get there or not. And sometimes when I stop at the red light by the elementary school and the buses nose onto the highway in a row, I hear a little voice I can't place, not the pitch of a child or the tone of an adult, something in between, like a memory that learned to talk. It says a number like it's taking attendance here, and the next number here, and the next here, and when the light turns green, I drive and try not to count along. If you get turned around up there and you see the porch, don't sit. Don't even step on the first board. Whatever the last house in the holler wants, it's not rest. And if you wake at dawn and it's gone, don't be relieved. Check your back seat before you drive away. If you find what I found, be gentle with them and be sorry out loud. It won't undo anything, but manners matter where the road ends. I was on the midnight shift with our volunteer fire and rescue in a small hill country county I won't name. If you're from around here, though, you could probably guess it. Picture limestone bluffs, low live oaks with their arms twisted like they grew up in wind, cattle guards that rattle your teeth, and 2-lane ranch roads that carve down into valleys where the fog sits like spilled milk. We call one of those cuts Hollow Creek. It's not on the map as that, but everybody knows what you mean. There's a low crossing where the creek disappears under cattails and reappears around a bend, and when the air is right after midnight, a white sheet slides off the ridge and pools there. You can drive along RR32 and see it glowing in your headlights like somebody laid down a mattress of cloud. Old-timers call it the crying fog. Some laugh when they say it like it's a campfire story. Others won't even drive that road if the humidity's high. They'll add 20 minutes to go around. The deputy story is the one that keeps people honest. This was a few years before I started volunteering. A young deputy, we'll call him Avery, took a call about kids crying down in Hollow Creek around 2 a.m. No houses there, just pasture and cedar and a fridge-turned mailbox on one fence post. He went to check. Dispatch heard his truck door open and close, heard his boots on gravel, heard him say, "I hear it. I'm going down the grade." The next thing they heard was a long burst of nothing, not radio static, not wind. Just a sound like his mic was pressed against a pillow. Backup found him at sunrise, wandering a caliche road 2 ranches over with, his eyes clouded white like cataracts and both palms scratched up with little crescent marks. He kept muttering, "Hands in the mist," like a nursery rhyme gone wrong. Avery got some of his sight back, enough to make his way around the grocery without running into the end caps. He left the county. Nobody blames him. But that phrase stuck. Hands in the mist. I heard it my second month on call. I wasn't even down in Hollow Creek. I was at the station drinking burnt coffee and arguing with my buddy Marcus about whether it was actually cooler to sit outside the bay doors or inside, by the soda machine, when our county app pinged with a welfare check. The note said, "Caller reports crying children in the valley. Can't tell if animal or human. Caller sounds shaken." The address pin floated right over the low curve where the fog likes to sit. Deputy Luna called in that she was en route and asked for a second car. Sheriff's office was thin that night, so the sergeant sent us to stage at the top of the grade. We rolled out in brush 2, lights off until we hit the county road. The air smelled like creek water and wet stone before we even saw the fog. If you've never seen it do that, just appear, you'd think somebody was pumping a movie set. The ridge was clear and starry. The mesquite shadows were crisp. Then the road tilted down and the world turned white at hood level. Luna idled behind us in her cruiser. We all stepped out and stood at the lip. At first I told myself it was cattle. Calves can sound human if you catch them lowing from the right angle. Or coyotes playing with their food. I've heard foxes scream and all the hair on my neck stood up. But this was small. It came in little quiet sob bursts from inside the fog, like when a kid's trying to be brave and not make a scene, but the breath keeps catching in their chest, and it moved. It wasn't stationary like a hurt animal. It would fade from the left side of the road to the right and back again, as if whoever was crying was circling us, staying just out of the clear air. Luna cupped her hands and yelled, "Sheriff's office, call out." It sounded like we were yelling into a cotton ball. The fog swallowed our voices. My radio crackled the way it does when it's been rained on, except it was dry in my hand. Marcus said, "Hell no, he doesn't scare easy, but he has kids." You could see it hit him in the face. He kept looking at the ditch like a toddler might stand up any second, soaked and shaking. We got to go down there. "Wait," Luna said, and clicked her shoulder. "Mike. Dispatch, can you call the number back? Have them stay on the line, guide us in." The number went straight to voicemail. The crying hissed like it was behind us now. I took a step closer to the white edge, and every leaf around us flash-beated, with dew at once. You think I'm exaggerating, but it was like the moisture had been waiting just off-frame and decided to show itself. I watched a glossy drop race down the windshield of the brush truck and leave a little runnel. Something about that bothered me more than the crying. The air touched my skin in a damp way, like breath that wasn't mine. We decided to drive the trucks as far as we felt comfortable and stop. Keep the lights on, keep our engine noise going. It felt like a sane thing. Do the loud, obvious, normal human stuff. I rode the running board while Marcus crept us over the cattle guard. The fog curled around our ankles and knees and then our waists. It had weight, not like smoke, like wet fabric. The crying slid from somewhere under the live oak on our right to a patch of cattails on our left with a little sloshy sound, like somebody walking in shallow water. "Sheriff's office," Luna called again. "If you can hear me, call out." Silence, then a soft the kind a kid makes when they don't want to talk. Then the cry started up again, closer this time, thin and sore. That's when we saw the handprints. I would have missed them if Marcus hadn't pointed. "Jake," he said, voice flat. "The hood." Little prints bloomed on the brush truck's hood in beads of water. 5-fingered small, spaced wrong, like the fingers were too close to each other. They formed one after another, then 2 more appeared beside them, and then a streak like something wiped a little arm from elbow to wrist. The hands were cold enough to condense moisture on the metal. That's what I told myself later. In the moment, all I could think was that the truck was too warm for dew, and those prints were not coming from falling mist. They were writing themselves. "This is a prank," Luna said, hopeful and angry. "Somebody's got atomizers down there. Some idiot with a fog machine." We all wanted to believe her. That's when our radios all clicked at once and a sound came out like fabric being torn. It wasn't from dispatch or any unit. It was just a long, slow rip and then a whisper. Not words. Air shaped like them. I couldn't tell you what it said except that it felt the way the crying sounded. Like a teacher saying your name after you've done something wrong in front of the class. We backed out. I won't pretend we were heroic that night. When the fog is thin, you can convince yourself it's just dirty weather. That fog had a wall to it. You could have cut it with a drywall knife. We retreated to the top of the grade and waited for the breeze to slide in from the ridge and unroll it. The crying faded with the fog. We did a slow drive through the low spot, spotlights sweeping the ditch, Marcus hanging out his window, calling, "Are you okay?" It was empty except for a pile of riverstones stacked 3 high right off the shoulder where nobody would have a reason to stack them. We wrote it up. Welfare check. No contact. The sergeant said in his dry voice. Try not to encourage the local ghost tourism. We laughed it off. We laugh a lot in this job. It's the kind of laughter that needs a place to go. After that, it was like once I heard it, I started hearing versions of it everywhere. A caller from a short-term rental house on the next ridge swore she heard crying around 1:30 and followed it outside. And when she got to the gravel turnaround, her breath didn't fog, but her car windows did from the inside. She asked if we thought carbon monoxide could do that, even though the car hadn't been running. A rancher found small wet footprints on his concrete stoop on a clear night. Not baby feet, not possum, bear, 5 toes. We told him raccoon. There's only so much weird a man in a starched shirt will write down without getting a reputation. Then came the missing kids. They weren't even kids technically, 17 and 18, boys from the next county who'd been night fishing with cheap Walmart rods at a stock tank and took the long way home, the scenic road, with the music up and windows down. Their moms said different things in the interviews. One mom said they never did that, they were respectful boys. The other mom said of course they did that, they were 18. Both moms were right in their own way. What mattered was that a little after 2, their locked phones pinged the tower near Hollow Creek and then went dark. The car was found on the shoulder with the hazards on. Driver's door open, keys in the cup holder, a warm soda can sweating in the console. No sign of a struggle, no blood. Just the car pointed downhill into the white. We did a ground search starting at first light. Marcus and I took the fence line on the east side with Deputy Luna and an older guy, retired game warden named Tally, who knew every inch of that land. The fog had burned off, but the grass felt wrong under my boots, cool and spongy even where the sun hit it. You know that feeling when you step off a floating dock and the wood bounces just a little? That's the closest thing I can compare it to. The valley felt unmoored. We found sign. Not the sign we expected. No boot prints, no dragging marks. The gravel on the shoulder was smoothed like a palm had been rubbed across it. And past the ditch, in the dust on the caliche, were enough little handprints to make my stomach drop, not in a line, in clusters, like a crowd gathered and then parted. Coyotes, Tally said. He was trying on explanations like shirts. Kits they get to playing, they'll leave messes like that. They'd leave scat too, Luna said. Tally didn't answer. He touched one of the prints with his fingers and shook off a fine powder of dried mud, as if the prints had been made with wet clay and hardened in place. Because the boys were missing, we worked the creek bed. We brought ropes and radios and a rescue sled in case someone had fallen down the limestone cut banks. The creek was barely running, clear as glass where it pooled. The cattails were still. No frogs talked. The place had a held breath feeling. I wanted noise, I wanted cicadas and crickets and one angry blue jay. We had birds out in the open on the ridge. Down in Hollow Creek there was only our boots and the little tap of pebbles knocked loose. Hold up, Marcus said. Jake, hear that? At first I didn't. Then I did. Not crying this time. A soft, irregular bump, like when my kids were little, and they'd hit their heel against the back of their car seat without realizing. Bump. Pause. Bump, bump. It was coming from the shade under a rock shelf, a place you'd expect to find a raccoon nest. We cut our chatter. Luna raised a hand to stop the line. I eased forward. You don't want to put your face right up to a place undercut by water. Snakes like those. Your eyes will never unsee a band of copper moving. But the bumping kept going. I crouched and shined my light and I saw a rope. A bit of old cotton clothesline, frayed and green with algae, tied to the roots that hung from the shelf. It swung an inch and tapped stone. Bump, tap, bump. Nothing sinister in that at all, except the far end of the rope was tied to a little loop of sticks. And woven into that loop, wet and wilting, was a bow made from ribbon. The cheap satin kind you put in a little girl's hair. Nobody said anything. Marcus reached over me and pinched the rope. It was slick and colder than the water around it. He jerked back like he'd touched a power line. We marked it and moved on because when someone is missing, you don't stop to debate symbolic garbage. The creek coughed up. You do your clockwork, you grid, you look, you call out. We made it. To the far fence where a rusted gate hangs open year-round and spits you onto a 2-track. That's where we saw the first boy. Except it wasn't. It wasn't either of them. It was someone else. A teen with sunburnt ears wearing an old oil-field t-shirt with a company logo I haven't seen since I was a kid. He was barefoot and wet to the knees. He stood in the 2-track like he'd just stepped up out of the ground and looked past us like we were an angry teacher and he didn't want to get yelled at. "Hey," Luna called, relief cracking her voice because finding any kid is better than finding no kid. "Hey, buddy, stay right there. What's your name?" He blinked like the effort of seeing us hurt. His eyes were bloodshot all through the whites. "Do you not run?" Luna said. Calm now, breathing through it like she was passing a wreck on the highway. "We're here to help you. What's your name?" He opened his mouth. The sound that came out was wrong. It wasn't a word. It was that same high sob we'd heard in the fog the week before, except it was shaped by lips now. It hit me at a stupid angle. Made me think of a dog you expect to bark and instead it says mama. Everything in me wanted to step back. Luna stepped forward instead because that's who she is. That's when the air changed. I don't know how to put it into text in a way that doesn't sound like I'm trying to be poetic. The sunlight dimmed without clouds to do it. The heat went away and left absence. The smell of river mud rolled up like a stranger's coat. The boy blurred around the edges, not like he was a ghost, not filmy, but like he was in heat shimmer, and the rest of the world was not. Marcus grabbed my sleeve, and Jake, he said. He didn't make a sentence out of it. He didn't have to. "Back up," Tally said under his breath, like we were easing away from a big cat that might decide we were worth the trouble. Nice and easy. The boy took one step and the 2-track took him. If you've ever watched a mirage swallow a truck on the horizon and make it look like the asphalt is water, that's the closest comparison I have. The line of the road flexed and ate his legs to the knees, then gave him back nothing. He sank without splashing. The place where his feet had been was just dust and 2 dandelions that hadn't been crushed. We didn't run then either. We should have. Instead, we moved like we were full of jelly. The rational brain hates to throw in the towel. It will stand in a burning room and argue about insurance. Luna radioed the sergeant with a dead flat report. "I have a possible subject lost visual, requesting additional units and permission to pull back." The radio spit back a wet breath noise and snapped off. The fog came fast, not from the creek, this time but from the ground. It lifted out of the grass like it had been waiting underground. We lost sight of the fence posts first, then the gate. Then the white edge of Luna's teeth faded, and I had her only by the black line of her silhouette. Against all that white, we linked wrists out of reflex. "Rope," Marcus said, and his voice went up an octave, pure panic. We hadn't brought a belay for a routine grid. We got stupid. Hands touched us. That's the part I hate remembering. They were small and cool and dry, which made no sense in that wet. When you're a parent, you learn the weight of little hands. These weren't like that. These had no muscle. They pressed and slid and pressed again like they were testing what we were made of. One traced the back of my elbow, then stopped on the inside of my arm like it found a warm seam and wanted to push there. Another spread itself flat over my chest and patted twice, like counting. One ran down my cheek to my mouth and paused at my lips, polite as a doctor in a white room. "Don't," I said, like you'd talk to a toddler reaching for a stove, because some part of me believed it was a behavior you could redirect. "Don't. No." The crying was everywhere. It didn't sound like sorrow up close. It sounded like the tiny, frustrated squeaks a kid makes when their hands don't work yet and they're trying to pull a zipper. The hands pushed again. My eyes watered. Not with emotion. With something sharp. A sting like when you pour rubbing alcohol near your face and feel the air carry it. The moisture ran out of my eyes freely. When I blinked, I could see less. White on white on white. Someone, Marcus maybe, cursed and then breathed. Back up, like a chant. We moved our feet by inches. The ground made that dock bounce again. A hand squeezed my fingers and tried to lace them with little bones that were there and not. They didn't have weight, they only had direction. Lots of direction, all at once, as if all the tiny forces in that fog had opinions on where I should go. The opinions did not include up. "Think about heat," Tally said suddenly, hoarse like he was holding his breath and letting it out through tight teeth. "Think about engines. Think about fire. Think about the sun off the hood. Think about your wife's cast iron in the oven. Think hot." I thought he'd lost it. Then I realized his hand was firm on the back of my neck, turning me like he could feel a gradient. He was walking us like cattle through a gate you can't see. "Heat rises," he said. To himself or to me, I'll never know. "These things, this likes cold, it goes where the ground sweats, find where the air stings less." That was the trick that saved us, I think. We moved toward the sting. Not away. Where my eyes watered hardest, we kept going. Where my lips felt dry, we stopped. It was backwards. It was like walking out of a freezer blindfolded. I felt my forearms go from cool wet to tacky warm, and a pressure I hadn't known was on my chest, lifted like a child being set down from a hug they didn't want to end. We came up out of it like breaking a skin of ice on a stock tank. The world snapped back. The fence posts were fence posts. The grass was grass with burrs that stuck to my socks. The sun hit the top of my head so hard it made me flinch. A breath later, the fog lay where it belonged, down along the creek like a creature in its bed. Behind us, in the white, something tapped twice on the metal gate. Bump, pause, bump, bump, as if to say we'd passed the test or failed it. I don't know. We found the boys not there, not even that day. Around 5 that evening, a ranch hand 10 miles away spotted 2 figures walking a fence line with their hands out like sleepwalkers. Both had eye irritation so bad they couldn't open them under full daylight. They kept mumbling about a playground and a rope and a bell. They were dehydrated, not hypothermic, no injuries. Neither one would go near a humidifier in the hospital. The older one told his mom that if she ran the shower for steam, he'd move out. They didn't talk to us. Sheriff's office tried, and so did a ranger who knows how to be quiet. The boys didn't have a story. You know how trauma erases the worst part and leaves you with dull shapes? That's what they had. They remembered a soft thumping. They remembered laughter that didn't sound like laughing. They remembered someone whispering at the edge of their hearing. And if they tried to remember what it said, their eyes would smart and water until the nurse came and put damp cloths on them and told us to leave. I thought that was the end. You don't get closure in real life. People drift back to their versions of normal. The moms went online and picked fights with strangers who said it was drugs or a stunt. The rancher with the bare footprints moved a camper to the far corner of his property and put an aunt in it because his wife refused to sleep in any room that faced the creek. The sergeant told us we did good work and to keep our mouths shut about anything we couldn't put on paper. 2 weeks later, I woke up to crying. It came the way sound comes in dreams, sideways. I sat up like someone had touched my shoulder. The room was dark and heavy. My AC had died at some point in the night and the air was thick enough to chew. I live in a little rental with a carport, one of those places with a window unit, not central. The crying drifted through the cheap screen. Not loud, not theatrical, the quiet, tired kind. The kind a kid makes when they've already been crying for a long time and there's no adult coming and they're just keeping the needle in the same groove. I lay there and told myself I was hearing a cat. I told myself I was hearing a neighbor, watching some late-night soap with their windows open. I told myself a lot of dumb things and didn't move. Then, because I didn't want to be the person who didn't look, I got up and slipped my feet into shoes and went to the kitchen, because the only thing between my bed and the carport was linoleum and a cheap door. I turned on the porch light, which is one of those low LEDs that might as well be a candle in fog. The crying paused, like breath held. Then a little pattern of soft taps started up, bump, pause, bump, bump, on the hood of my truck. I did not open the door. I am not stupid. I watched the condensation bloom in a perfect handprint on the driver's side glass from the inside. Second handprint appeared beside it. Fingers splayed like a kid playing at scaring someone through glass. Then the print slid down out of sight, slow, like someone was crouching. I turned off the light. The tap stopped. I stood there listening to my own blood in my ears. After a long time, the AC kicked back on. I didn't sleep. In the morning, the truck was dry. You could swear you imagined it. I was ready to gaslight myself, except when I got in. The inside rear-view mirror was tilted down like someone half my height had adjusted it. I told nobody. This is me telling you. I know how that sounds. We don't take the grade at night anymore if we can help it. That sounds like superstition, but it's policy now. Unofficial but real. Enforced by looks. Road maintenance put up reflectors on the fence posts along the low curve around the creek so drivers could see the line even when the fog eats the world. The reflectors collect dew in little beads at the same time, like an audience of eyes. The county put a new sign warning of low visibility. Someone put a smaller sign under it that says, "Do not follow voices." It keeps getting stolen, and then another one appears. Like there's a guy at his kitchen table making them with stencils, angry for reasons he can't say out loud. Deputy Avery doesn't live here, but his sister does. I saw her once at HEB and almost asked her how he was. I didn't. What would she say? He can see enough to mow his yard. He says grace with the lights off. He won't take a shower if the bathroom door is closed. He still says hands in the mist when the TV volume gets fuzzy. I made all of that up because I don't know, but it's probably close. People will tell you there used to be an orphanage down there, which is a lie. It was never that. There was a church camp in the 1950s, and one summer a flash flood came down out of a blue sky and took 3 kids who were waiting where the creek bent under the rock shelf. That part is true. It's on the microfilmed paper at the library. They found one boy 6 miles downstream snagged in old barbed wire. The other 2 were never found. If you're tempted to make a neat line between that and this, go ahead. Humans draw lines. The thing in the fog might not care about our lines. It might be older than a flood, or newer than a ribbon tied to a stick. It might be the way humidity remembers pain. It might be a trick of air and pressure that happens to tune itself to our nerves. It might be nothing but a story I'm telling to strangers on the internet, because if I tell it to people who know me, they'll look at me the way people looked at Avery when he was trying to see the cash register. I still work nights sometimes. I still drive that road in daylight with my arm out the window because I love the way the live oaks lean and the hawks hang on invisible wires over the pasture. When evening falls, I go around. A week ago, we had a front come in heavy and fast, the way they do here, with wind that hits like a truck and then 20 minutes of silence before the rain. The bay doors at the station were open. The air shifted. I watched a stripe of fog snake across the lot at ankle height, thin as cigarette smoke. It found the shade under the brush truck and thickened. Water fell off the bumper in 4 fat drops. I could taste salt on my upper lip like I'd cried, except I hadn't. I took a wrench and tightened the exhaust clamp on the brush truck because that is a thing I can do. Marcus watched me and didn't say anything. He had raccoon eyes from not sleeping and a little scrape I recognized on the inside of his forearm from where something small grabbed him without weight. When people ask me, at cookouts, why I still volunteer if I hate that part of the county so much, I tell them the truth. Most of it isn't like that. Most calls are broken ankles, smoke alarms, a drunk who tried to make ramen on a stove and forgot he didn't have a pot. You show up, you help, you laugh until you can't. And sometimes, you stand at the lip of a white bowl in the dark and a sound you think is a kid asks you to come hold their hand. And you want to. God help you. You want to. The last time I drove past Hollow Creek in daylight, I pulled over where the shoulder widens and stood with my hands in my pockets looking down at the creek bed. Someone had left a little coat hook there on the fence. Post, the kind shaped like a smiling whale screwed into sun-silvered wood. I don't know why. Maybe someone lost a hat there and someone else thought they'd give it a place to wait. Maybe they thought kids would hang their towels after swimming. Maybe it just made them laugh. I reached to straighten it because it hung crooked. When I touched the metal, my fingers came away damp. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I was getting back into the truck. It was a text from an unknown number. No words. Just a photo of fogged glass with 2 handprints pressed into it. Fingers too close together, little palms side by side. My chest went cold in a slow way. I looked around the empty road and the empty fields and there was nobody. Then the number texted again. This time it was just audio. 4 seconds, a small breath in and a soft sound like a rope tapping stone. Bump. Pause. Bump, bump. I deleted the thread. I wish I could say I saved it to prove something. I want to tell you I'm braver than I am. I drove home the long way over the ridge, where the wind has somewhere to go and the sun burns off everything that can't stand it. At night, when the AC hums and the house settles and you can hear your neighbor's pipes click as somebody showers, I sometimes think I hear that kid sob again. Not loud, just the edge of it. It sounds almost like relief, like it knows I'm listening, like it knows most people aren't. When that happens, I keep my mouth closed and breathe through my nose until it passes. I do not open the blinds. I do not reach for the door. I count slow and easy in my head, not because I'm scared, but because I remember how those hands felt, testing the place where I end and the cold begins, and I don't want to give them any more warmth to work with. If you come through here on some night when the heat is broken and the fog is low and the reflectors on the fence posts shine like a line of eyes, keep your windows up. If you hear crying, don't be cruel about it, but don't be kind the way a person is kind to a child in a grocery aisle. Do not talk to it like it will answer you and make sense. If your radio makes a tearing sound and the word you think you hear is your name, think about heat. Think about the sun on the hood. Think about a skillet left on. Walk toward the sting. Promise yourself you'll be the kind of adult who doesn't go where the little hands want you to, even if you're the only adult around. And if you see one of us pulled off at the top of the grade at 1 a.m. with the engine idling and no one standing outside, just a shape in the cab breathing quiet, don't honk, don't stop, don't ask questions. Sometimes we sit and listen because not listening is worse. Sometimes we're waiting for the fog to give the road back. Sometimes we're trying to make sure the crying doesn't learn our names. I grew up hearing the kind of stories small towns tell to keep you from being stupid. Don't swim at the quarry after dark. Don't park on the trestle when the midnight train is due. Don't cut through the cemetery because the shortest way is sometimes the longest way around. In Dry Branch, the one that stuck was about the man with the lantern who walked the back roads at night, swinging it slow like a signalman, like somebody who had a job out there in the dark. Folks said if you stopped, he would walk up to your window and ask the way home. That was the part everyone repeated, the exact phrasing, which way home? If you answered, they said you were found, later burned to ash in your car. The glass crazed, but not melted. The upholstery charred like it had been pressed with a hot iron 1,000 times. Most people laughed it off the way you laugh at a superstition you still obey. Nobody wanted to be the one who tested it. I left Dry Branch after high school and only came back when my dad died last fall. He'd been living alone since Mom passed, and the house needed to be cleared and sold. My little sister Jill flew in from Asheville to help me. We split the work the way grown-up kids do when they don't want to fight about it. I took the garage and the shed. She took the closets and the kitchen. We promised each other we'd be done in a week. We lasted 12 days. Most of those nights we ate late at the diner because the stove in Dad's kitchen had a patch of burned-on grease that smoked when you breathed near it. The diner is one of those places that looks like it was welded to the highway. A triangular neon sign throws pink on the gravel. A cooler rattles in the corner. Everybody knows your grandparents, whether they met them or not. The second night, we got caught in a conversation with Deputy Haynes, who'd known my dad long enough to think he could joke with us about how many lawnmower engines he left rusted behind the shed. He was one of those deputies who makes you relax. Soft voice, short, calm sentences. I'd known him when I was a kid as one of the men who waved the baton at the 4th of July parade. "Y'all staying out on Dry Branch Road?" he asked, stirring too much sugar into his coffee. "Do yourselves a favor and take the main route at night. Old Mill Road is flooding in spots and there's logging trucks using it after midnight. Not worth it." Jill was scrolling through listings for storage units. "We're not going to be out that late," she said. Haynes looked at me like big brothers are the problem. "You know better," he said. "This town eats time." We laughed at that. Then the waitress, who still remembered me as Marie's boy, reached over to set down the check and said without looking at us, and don't stop for lanterns." Haynes nodded like it was the chorus of a song. "Don't stop for lanterns," he said. "If someone's really broke down, they'll have their flashers on. You grow up with a story and you don't talk about it directly because that makes it real. You mention it sideways like a weather report you're not sure you believe." That was how it came up all week. The guy at the gas station told me I should get new wiper blades if I was going to be driving the back roads in fall. Nobody likes being caught in a storm. The old man who still mows the churchyard said he had a spare reflector triangle in his shed in case I ever needed to set one up behind a car at night. Safer than waving a light. Jill found a box of Mom's candles and put 2 in the glove box, then laughed and said, "This town has me preparing for the 19th century. I know how this sounds. I'm not the kind of person who sees patterns in everything, and I definitely wasn't in a good headspace. We were sleeping in the old house without turning on the heat, under blankets that smelled like my parents' laundry soap. We were both having the kind of dreams you have when you sleep in a room that hasn't been yours for a decade. But there was a little more to it than suggestibility. The first time I saw the lantern, I was alone. Jill had driven to the grocery store to get more tape and zip-top bags, and I took a load of trash out to the Clay County Convenience Center, which is a fancy name for a row of green dumpsters with a man in a booth who tells you which ones you're allowed to use. The shortest way back to the house was Old Mill Road, a 1-lane cut along the creek that rises up on your left like a wall. It's not the kind of road you use if you're in a hurry. The trees lean over it. The rock face sweats. You have to honk before you go into a blind curve because people in this county like to pretend the horn is the only safety feature they need. About a mile from the iron bridge, I saw somebody down the way walking in the ditch with a lantern. I thought of Haynes and his logging trucks. I eased up on the gas and reached to turn off the AC because the window was starting to fog. The person was in dark clothes, maybe a jacket or a long shirt, and the lantern was the old kind. The glass bell in the wire cage. It swung in a slow rhythm. The man didn't look up. He kept the swing steady, like he was measuring his steps by it. I slowed to a crawl. I didn't want to scare him, and I also didn't want to pass too close and have him step into me at the last second. People do that when they're dazzled by headlights. I remember thinking, at least it's not some teenager out here with a phone flashlight. And then he angled the lantern toward me, not all the way up, just enough that I could see the glass. It wasn't a phone app. It was a real flame. There was a moment when I thought, this is a nice little piece of living history, like the man is walking back from checking his lines. Then he stepped toward the center of the road. I stopped. There wasn't anywhere to pass. He kept coming, not waving, not pointing for me to go around. The lantern swung up so the light was at the level of my window, and there was a smear on the glass from where I'd wiped it with my sleeve. The lantern glow slid over that smear and made it look wet. I kept the doors locked and put the car in park, and I kept both hands on the wheel because I didn't want to be the guy who fumbled and hit the power button for the window by accident. He came up to the glass and leaned in without touching it, and the light hit his face in the ugly way lantern light does where you can't quite see the eyes. His skin looked gray like ash rubbed onto concrete, but I could have been seeing the reflection of my headliner. He didn't look old or young. He looked like a face you will fill in later when you try to remember it. He stood there with the lantern, not knocking, not waving. My first thought was that he wanted me to roll down the window. The story rose up in my head the way an old song does, the part about let him speak and he'll ask you the way home. I felt the heavy stupidity of the situation. There I was, 20 years away from believing that sort of thing, and I could not make myself hit the window switch. I stared ahead at my own reflection in the glass where it went dark at the corners. I kept both hands on the wheel and looked at my knuckles. After a few seconds, he stepped back. He didn't turn around. He didn't even lift the lantern for me to read his body. He just stepped back and let me inch around him. I did that thing where you look far down the road like you're not interested in what's happening in front of you. The rabbit ran out in front of me right after like it had been waiting. It zigzagged and then went left up into the bank. The hair on my arm stayed up for a full minute after it was gone. When I told Jill about it, she said, "Okay, that sounds like a real guy. Maybe the signalman you were talking about. People still check their fences with lanterns, I bet." Then she grabbed my wrist and said, "Please tell me you didn't roll down the window." When I said I didn't, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. We laughed, but we both kept glancing at the windows as if a face might appear there and press itself to the glass. The second time, we were together. It was raining hard enough that the water sheeted along the windshield wipers, the kind of rain that makes a road go matte. We'd stayed too late because we found a shoebox full of old letters in the bottom of Mom's cedar chest, and neither of us could leave them. We read them like we were stealing time. When we finally managed to lock the door, it was after 11, and we chose Old Mill Road because the highway was closed past the church for a sinkhole repair. I remember the knot in my stomach when the GPS rerouted and wrote the words Old Mill Road without asking me. I turned off the voice directions. I didn't want to hear anything talk. Halfway to the bridge, the radio cut in on its own. Do cars still do that, or was this only mine? I had the Bluetooth on, and Jill's phone was playing quietly through a playlist she uses to keep from thinking too hard. The radio caught a frequency for a second, and I heard a voice say, "Home," like it was testing the mic. Then it went back to her music. We both looked at the screen like it had coughed something up. "Probably the logging company," Jill said. "They use radios, or, I don't know, weather alert." "Yes, I said. I tapped the screen to switch to local FM because I suddenly wanted to hear a human voice. The only station that came in had a preacher on it. He was saying the word fire so often, it sounded like he was chewing it. We came around the big curve where the creek shoulders the road, and there he was again. Same steady swing, same dark clothes. The rain did something strange around his lantern, bending away from it like heat haze. I slowed. Jill reached over and locked the doors even though they were already locked. She put one hand flat on the top of the glove box like she was steadying herself, and the radio cut in again, just long enough to say, "Home?" in a voice that sounded like our mother's. If you've lost a parent, you know what that did to us. It was like somebody reached in and grabbed your cables. Jill said no, under her breath, not to me. She kept her eyes forward. The man stepped into the middle of the road and held the lantern still, not swinging it. The light put a circle on the wet asphalt that swallowed the yellow line. He took 2 steps toward my window. The heat came up, in the car like I had turned the defroster to max, and the windshield fogged half a breath faster than we could wipe it with our sleeves. My hand went for the window switch out of reflex. Jill grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt and said, "If you love me, don't." He leaned in until the glass should have fogged from his breath and the rain didn't seem to hit him. It skated off the air around him and ran in little streams down the door like the path had already been worn there. He didn't touch the car. The light hovered close enough that I could see the wire cage thrown big on the headliner. I could feel the urge to resolve this the way you resolve a normal night encounter. Crack the window. Ask if he needs help. Point him toward town. It felt impolite not to. That urge was the scariest part, sharper than the light, sharper than the heat. It felt like something had been set in motion that would break if I didn't. Say the one right sentence to make it stop. The radio voice said softer home. And I realized the problem. The answer to that question is never neutral. You can't answer the way you answer a survey. If you say where it is, you've given him a line. If you say you don't know, that's still an answer. If you say anywhere, you've described your own map. The only way is silence. I gripped the wheel until my hands hurt. Jill put her head down against the dash and pulled up the hood of her raincoat as if that would change what was happening, as if not seeing his face would unmake it. He waited long enough that I knew this wasn't some prank. Then he stepped back, and the rain swallowed the space he had been standing in, and I drove on. I didn't let myself look in the mirror. Jill kept saying, "Okay, okay, okay," like the word could carry us across the bridge. The morning after that, we heard about a car fire up near where Old Mill Road meets the highway. I didn't hear it from the news. I heard it from Mr. Riggs at the gas station, who was telling the county inspector that he needed to replace 2 nozzles because the plastic had warped in the heat. "You can feel it in the air before it happens," Riggs said to me later. "Like when a storm rides your sinuses." He showed me the nozzles. The plastic felt waxy. One of them had a print on it like someone had gripped it hard, and the material softened around their fingers. He let me touch it the way a museum lets you touch a meteorite. "You be careful out there at night," he said. "You look like your dad when you ignore the noise." We tried to be smart after that. We packed during the day. We dropped loads at the convenience center before it closed. When we did end up out late, we took the long way around, past the church and the high school and down onto the state road where the road lines were bright and there were billboards telling you that God was listening. It worked until the night, with the stranded couple. They were in a rental car with Ohio plates and the kind of luggage you buy when you leave home for the first time and want people to know you have brand new things. They had hit a rock that had come down from the hillside after a rain, and it had punched their oil pan. When we drove by, the man was holding his phone up like a divining rod trying to catch a signal, and the woman was sitting in the passenger seat with the door open, her hair pinned up like you do when you mean to fix your car the same way you fix a hairdo. We pulled over behind them and turned on our hazards. I had a tow strap in the back from Dad's junkyard life. This is the thing that still knots me up because that was the right thing to do. We were in a place where another car might not come for a while, and they weren't dressed for waiting. I walked up and kept my hands out where they could see them because people are rightfully cautious these days. The man smiled like people do when they realize help is not theoretical anymore. We talked about the oil pan. I looked under his car and saw how bad it was. I told him I could pull them the 2 miles to the church lot if he kept his hazards on, and didn't try to steer me. Jill rolled down her window and introduced herself to the woman so she could talk and be a person, and not a stranded passenger. It felt good to be useful. It felt like something my dad would have done without thinking. We got them hooked up and started around the first bend, barely faster than a walk. You don't want to snag a bumper out there. The rain had stopped, but the road was still wet enough to throw spray like dust. Jill was watching the mirror and giving me calm little updates in a voice she must have used for her kindergarten classroom. "Easy on the line. You're good. They're good." We were fine until the third turn, the one that hugs the creek so close the weeds brush the side of your car. Something in the mirror sparked. At first I thought it was their hazard lights reflecting on water. Then it resolved into a shape, the tight moving light of a lantern bouncing in the hitch shimmer behind their hood. Not a reflection. A separate source keeping pace. "Don't stop," Jill said. She wasn't looking out the back anymore. She was watching the side window the way you watch a door you know is going to open. "Don't stop, Sam. I mean it." The man in the rental honked once like a question. The woman leaned out and shouted something I couldn't hear. The lantern light climbed up and sprayed across their windshield and then across ours like someone had thrown a bucket of dimness. The radio crackled. The voice said, "Home?" And this time it had a little rise at the end like it was learning how to make it sound polite. The GPS, which I had left on the map view without voice, flashed a banner by itself. "Head home." I kept the car pointed forward. Old Mill Road narrowed just enough right there that if you stopped, you would have to think hard about backing up straight. We were nearly to the bridge. I thought about the iron grating and how it would rattle under our tires. I thought about the story about the man with the lantern, and I heard my dad, who loved a practical rule, telling me never to stop on a bridge if I had options on either side. I said it out loud so someone would hear it. I am not stopping on the bridge. The lantern light came up next to my window as if it had walked through the hill to get there, and a gloved hand, no, not a glove, just skin that looked like a glove, brushed the glass without touching it. It left a dry, pale smear like dust that stays no matter what you do. The heat came into the car again without the car making any heat. Jill had her eyes closed and was whispering a prayer she must have learned at Mom's bedside. The radio voice said home. And then, like a kid trying to get it right, which way home? I understood then what people meant when they said it felt personal. The voice didn't sound like my mother anymore. It sounded like Jill's, then mine, then the man in the rental asking me which way because he really needed to know. You don't realize how often you want to answer that question until every part of you is rehearsing it. My mouth made a shape. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted iron. The car behind us started to sway and I knew he was tapping his brake in a panic, trying to catch my eye in the mirror, trying to get me to stop so we could talk about it. Jill put her hand over my right hand where it was sliding toward the window switch and held it in place. The bridge rose up and there was nowhere to go but onto it. I drove onto the iron grating and felt the tires buzz. Halfway across, a set of blue lights flared behind the rental, and I almost cried from relief. Deputy Haynes had found us. He must have come the other way around. He pulled up to the end of the bridge and blocked it with his cruiser and stepped out fast, one hand up in a command gesture, the other on his radio. I rolled down my window an inch because he was saying something and I thought he was saying it to me. Jill slapped my wrist and the window stopped. Haynes was saying, "Everyone stay in your vehicles," in that calm parade voice. He was looking at me, then past me, at the light that had found us on the bridge and was painting everything the color of old paper. He took one step onto the grate. The lantern light shifted toward him as if it had smelled his attention. The radio on his shoulder squawked and I heard my own voice come out of it saying, "Home." Like a weird announcement. Haynes looked tired in a way I had never seen on his face. He reached up and pressed the talk button on the mic and said, gentle but firm, "No, sir. Exactly the way you talk to someone who's about to do something you can't let them do." It wasn't an answer. It was a refusal. He held the light in his eyes and did not blink. He was a better man than me. He kept saying no, without adding anything to it that could be turned into a map. He said it like he had practiced. He said it like he had kept saying it for years to everything that clawed at this town. He did that until someone in the rental car cracked a window and said, "You get to town if you keep following this, because that's what good people do. They help." It was the woman. She wasn't trying to be brave or foolish. She was being human. The light changed when she said it. It steadied. The heat snapped like a stove door closing. The radio stopped pretending to be us and went all the way silent. The kind of silence that has texture. I saw Haynes take a half step back like a man who has finally been given permission to move. He turned and pointed at me and lifted his hand, in a flat outward palm that meant go, go now. I listened. I put it in drive and pulled across the bridge. The rental followed, the strap bumping in the hitch like a fish on a line. When we got to the church lot, I pulled clear and got out and unhooked the strap with my hands trembling so hard I had to put my forehead against the bumper to steady myself. Jill sat in the passenger seat with both hands over her mouth. The couple kept saying thank you and I'm sorry in loops. I wanted to tell the woman she hadn't done anything wrong, but the words came out thin and shaky, so I just nodded and put my hands palm down on the hood until they stopped buzzing. No one called the local news. No one took a video. We all agreed without saying it that this was a thing you don't put on the internet because it dilutes it, and diluted things in Dry Branch seem to multiply. Haynes drove by 20 minutes later without his lights and made a circle of the lot just checking. He didn't stop, he didn't need to. He lifted his hand once on the wheel. I lifted mine back. I didn't sleep at the house after that. We booked a cheap hotel by the highway where the doors face the parking lot, and you can stand on the mat outside your room and look out at the road like you're waiting for a friend. Jill didn't argue. We finished packing in 2 days and left, the key with the realtor. I walked through Mom's room one last time and smelled her lavender sachets and promised the air that we'd come back when it felt right. Jill cried in the car silently, the way she does when she doesn't want to make anyone feed her comfort. On the way out of town, I stopped at the gas station. Mr. Riggs slid my card through the reader and frowned at the screen. "You got a weird message on here," he said. "Wants me to confirm your home address." He laughed and shook his head. They're nosy, these companies. I signed the receipt without reading it and handed it back. If there was anything extra written there, I didn't want it in my head. I put the pen down and my fingers smelled faintly of kerosene. I told myself I had touched something on the counter. I told myself a lot of things. In the months since, I have tested the boundaries of what follows you. I drove at night in my city and watched the reflections in windows. I kept the radio on low to make it harder for anything else to get in. Sometimes, the GPS decides to display the little house icon, and the words head home without me asking. Sometimes the smoke alarm chirps at 3 in the morning and stops when I stand under it with a chair, like it wanted me in one spot for a reason. My sister called me last week and said her microwave had flashed the word home when she unplugged it and plugged it back in. I told her microwaves do that. I told her to take the batteries out of her smoke detectors twice a year. We both pretended. That was the end of it. A few days ago, I found a print on my driver's side window that looks like the one I saw that night. Not from fingers, more like a shape that pressed near and evaporated and left its absence behind. I wiped it with a towel and it came back the next afternoon as if it had only been hiding under the light. I turn my mirrors in at night like an old trucker trick. The car doesn't smell like smoke. It smells like rain that came through a room and set something to drying. You'll ask why I'm writing this down, partly because people like me need stories like this, the kind that don't end with a neat circle drawn around them. Partly because nobody warned the Ohio couple about our rules and we almost made them pay for how decent they were. If you read this and you find yourself stopped at night with a stranger at your window, you don't need to believe what I believe to do the one safe thing. Keep the glass up. Look ahead. Let your silence be your whole answer. You are not being rude. You are not leaving someone behind. You are declining to draw a map for something that only looks like a person lost on a dark road. I have wondered a lot about Deputy Haynes and how he stood there and kept saying no. I wanted to ask him how you practice a refusal until it becomes a kind of prayer. I asked around 2 weeks after we left and found out he was fine the next day. In the way that word means functional, he came into the diner and stirred sugar in his coffee and stayed past his regular shift. He has a new dent in the cruiser where something outlined itself in heat without burning through. He doesn't park on the bridge anymore, but he's there, and I'm grateful for that. There is one last thing I haven't said because I don't know where to put it. On our last night in Dry Branch, when I carried the last box out to the car, I found a folded slip of paper under the driver's side wiper. No one was in the yard. No one could have walked up without the gravel telling me. The paper was a receipt from Riggs's station, the kind with the ink that fades to gray. In the middle of it, not in the lines and not where the total goes, someone had stamped a single word: home. No address, no way. No, just that word. Too big for the paper, the edges faint like it had been pressed over and over until the stamp started to dry. I threw it away in the trash can by the motel ice machine. I went back an hour later and it wasn't there. Maybe the housekeeping staff had emptied the bin. Maybe the paper never existed and I'm inventing it now because it fits too well. Either way, here is the last part. When I got into my car the next morning to leave, the GPS took a long time to find a signal, then flashed up my old address in Dry Branch with a cheerful little icon. Estimated time, 13 minutes, as if the house were closer than I thought. Next to it, for a fraction of a second, it showed a different icon I've never seen, a tiny lantern, before it switched back to the dot. I turned the screen off and drove with it dark. If you ever come through Dry Branch after midnight and see a light swinging in the ditch, keep going. If someone knocks on your window without touching it, keep your hands where they are. If a voice that knows you asks you which way home, let it hang there as if the world had asked a question that does not have an answer that is safe for you to give. If that sounds impolite to you, practice now alone in your car, with the windows up and your own breath fogging the glass. Say nothing until the urge to be helpful passes and you can feel the road under your tires again. And if you do answer, even by accident, even with something as small as a nod, I hope you are luckier than the story says. I hope the map it takes from you is fuzzy, and the places it finds are farther away than it can walk. I hope you have people in your life who can stand out in the road and say no for you while you learn how to do it yourself. Because I have started to think that is all the Lantern Man ever wanted. Not a place on a map, but permission to cross, a line that has to hold. He will ask again. He will be patient. He has all the time he needs. I am telling you what we tell each other here, what you only learn by coming home. Sometimes the safest thing you can say is nothing at all, and sometimes that is the only thing keeping the fire from finding your seat.